Chapter 39-34. Ning Shu suddenly smiled. After fighting with them so many times, he understood these people. However, he was a dog. Who would care about a dog's habits? Dogs, on the other hand, saw through people's habits. Ning Shu flicked his finger, and the mark shattered. In order to avoid other marks, Ning Shu checked himself, the stone man, and the root of the living soul. The grand uncle, who was tracking in the void, paused and stopped. He couldn't sense the mark anymore. They couldn't have run so fast that he couldn't sense the mark. The most likely explanation was that the mark had been destroyed. The grand uncle raised his eyebrows. This brain didn't seem to belong to the Divine Stone clan. The Divine Stone clan was made of stone from head to toe. Even their brains were made of stone. Without the mark, it would be difficult to track the cub and the stone man. The void was so big. Who knew where they went? He didn't expect to return empty-handed this time. He could only wait for the next plant to bloom. No one would be in a good mood if they returned empty-handed. The grand uncle was obviously in a bad mood. He pursed his lips and looked very cold. His gold-rimmed glasses reflected a cold luster. Without a target, the grand uncle decisively gave up. He turned around and disappeared into the void. After the examination, Ning Shu sat down and held her hand that was swollen like a pig's trotter. Her eyes were brimming with tears as she coughed violently. The stone man didn't know what to say. Ning Shu said to the stone man, "Let's find a secret place to eat the nectar." The tip of his nose had been filled with a sweet smell. It was actually so damn sweet. The stone man Ning Shu asked, "Do you want to go to the Divine Stone clan?" To be honest, it wasn't safe to go anywhere with such a big living soul. He had eaten living souls before, but why hadn't he thought of uprooting them? Ning Shu tilted his head and looked at the stone man's side face. He asked, "Are they fierce?" Not really. Some of the clansmen were stronger and bigger. They stuffed stones into their bodies. The harder the stone and metal, the higher the defense. The hobby of the clansmen was to continuously increase their defensive power. They were already born with defensive power, but they still desperately tried to increase their defensive power. Ning Shu nodded, "All right then, let's go meet the other Divine Stone tribe members." Seeing Ning Shu's carefree attitude, Stone Man paused and said, "You still need to be mentally prepared." "Prepare what? Are they going to eat me or kill me?" Ning Shu asked. Stone Man, he was completely speechless. The stone golem brought Ning Shu to the territory of the Divine Stone race. There was no grass, no water, only stones. There were all kinds of stones. Like Tarzan, the stone golems pounded their chests with their fists, and the sleeping mountains began to move, turning into stone golems one after another. "Shan Yu, why did you come back? Shan Yu, are there any good stones and metals outside? I told you not to go out. Look at you, you've lost weight. Shan Yu, where did you catch such a weak child? She's so weak, but you can still eat her. Let her go, let her go. You actually plucked a soul flower. It smells so good." Baba Shan Yu was dizzy from these questions. He explained, "This is a child I picked up. When she was born, there was only one of her. She didn't have enough energy and her body was weak." Ning Shu looked at these huge stone golems. It was too dangerous to live with them. He might be trampled to death while sleeping. He was too small and wouldn't be easily discovered. As a reward, Ning Shu received several soul flowers. The sweet nectar made Ning Shu stick out his tongue and lick it. He scooped up the honey with his fingers and stuffed it into his mouth. A mouthful of sweetness was simply too satisfying. Sweets made people happy. After having a body, Ning Shu indulged in his appetite. "It's not like I can't afford it. Why should I eat less? Why should I lose weight?" In particular, Tai Shu didn't even touch or taste the nectar. This made him even happier. The nectar became even sweeter. Well, it was so sweet that it was a little bit scary. The other stone golems also tasted it, but they didn't eat much. The rest was given to Ning Shu. Probably because Ning Shu was too weak, they gave all the nourishing things to her. The living flowers had been plundered clean, leaving only the plants, which had been tossed about listlessly. Collecting the remaining picture nectar, Ning Shu looked at the soul flower and felt that it was a waste to let it wither like this. Ning Shu said to the stone golem, "Let's plant this grass." The stone golem found that she had a hobby, which was to plant things. Previously, a tree fell and was replanted. This grass also had to be replanted. Ning Shu said, "This is a sustainable development route. Some habits engraved in the bones couldn't be changed." Ning Shu licked the nectar on her fingers and looked at the stone golem eagerly. The stone golem said, "But there's no environment for it to live around here. It's all stones here." Ning Shu carried the huge plant and looked for an environment suitable for the plant to grow with the stone golem. The stone golem looked at her and hesitated. He looked again and finally said, "Let me carry it." She carried the soul flower and couldn't see anyone. At a glance, it was as if the soul flower was moving by itself. Ning Shu waved her hand. "I'm a little full. It's digesting. I'll carry it." Fa Tian, who had a broken leg, arrived late. He arrived at the land of the soul, but it was empty. There was no soul. There was no one, but there were some very messy traces left. Obviously, many people had been here. But now, it was empty. There was a faint sweet and floral smell in the air, proving that there was indeed a soul in this place. It was just that he came late and didn't grasp the timing of the soul flower. Looking at the huge pit, Fa Tian slapped his face. These people were too cruel. He didn't ask for nectar or anything, just some leaves of the soul flower would be good. But now, he didn't even have a root. His trip was in vain. Fa Tian didn't know if there was anything else that could have the hope of reviving Ning Shu. He was really tired, really tired. He really didn't know what to do. How many years had it been? He had encountered too many things. There were too many disappointments and disappointments. He was full of expectation and disappointment. The soul flower was just one of many times. But, this nectar was too damn fragrant. He was so hungry. He wanted to eat it. It had been a long time since Tian had eaten desserts. He had not eaten desserts that were so sweet that it made him shiver. When he smelled the sweet nectar in the air, Tian's desire for desserts was ignited. He wanted to eat it. He wanted to eat dessert. He wanted to eat something sweet. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-35. Ning Shu carried the life soul and walked in the void with the stone man. Ning Shu had eaten too much nectar and felt uncomfortable in his stomach. Even now, his mouth was still sweet and greasy, making him feel uncomfortable and thirsty. Ning Shu put down the life soul and lay down in a small stream, drinking water for a long time. After drinking, his stomach swelled up even more. Sure enough, he couldn't be too greedy. Greedy for a while, greedy for a long time. Ning Shu put the life soul back on his shoulder and asked the stone man, "Why don't you guys like to eat this?" Those stone men tasted it and didn't eat it anymore. That much nectar was almost all Ning Shu's. The stone man said in a muffled voice, "It's normal not to like to eat it. Our source of power doesn't depend on food. Embedding more stones or metals into our bodies is more useful than eating these things. Other races need to obtain energy to obtain power, but we only need to add things to our bodies. However, finding good embedding things is harder than finding food." Ning Shu, who was one step behind Ning Shu, looked at the stone man who was as steady as a mountain. He was thinking, whether it was personality that determined the direction of development or physique that determined personality. The divine stone race constantly added defensive power to their bodies and developed in one direction. The divine stone race didn't have great destructive power, which meant that they couldn't find trouble. After all, you only have a strong defense, but you're lacking in lethality. They were content to stay in a corner and stood aloof from worldly affairs. The other races in the void would feel a headache when they saw such a big guy. They wouldn't waste their energy to fight the stone man. After all, it was too much of a waste of energy. In summary, it was normal for the stone men of the divine stone race to have such a personality. It wasn't like the environment she lived in before, where she had to equip herself with stronger strength. Ning Shu felt that he didn't have much chance of winning against the stone man. The stone man was very strong and his defensive power was very high. It would be too boring to fight. Ning Shu was very glad that he woke up and met an honest void creature that didn't have any bad intentions and didn't eat other races. Otherwise, he would definitely be eaten. The stone golem took him to many places and ate many things. The stone golem's sturdy and stalwart figure became even more stalwart in Ning Shu's heart. She cherished the stone golem's kindness. After all, she wasn't a child of the Godstone race, but he had taken care of her, allowing her to temporarily have someone to rely on in the void. More importantly, the stone golem helped her familiarize herself with the void bit by bit. In the past, the void that was incomparably dangerous in her heart and that she couldn't step into was slowly opening up before her eyes. After his rebirth, Ning Shu was very happy, even though his body was very weak. Ning Shu carried the soul of life on his shoulder and quickly caught up with the stone golem in front of him. He said, "Shan Yu, you are such a good person." Shan Yu's eyes were a little confused. "How did you know my name? Did I tell you my name?" "Ning Shu, I think you guys just don't give me face, blah blah blah." Did he forget? Shan Yu suddenly said, "Oh right, you don't even have a name yet. Why haven't I thought of giving you a name after such a long time?" "Ning Shu, actually, I do." Shan Yu suddenly slapped his head and said, "Since you like to eat nectar so much, you might as well call it nectar." "Ning Shu, if I like to eat meatballs, then wouldn't I call it meatball?" Ning Shu pursed his lips. "I have a name." The stone golem said, "Nectar sounds very nice. You are a female cub, many people will like you in the future." Ning Shu's lips twitched. "Hee hee." The stone golem paused and looked at Ning Shu with some sympathy. "You don't have your own race, how are you going to reproduce? If you are with other races, you will probably be bullied." Ning Shu, 3. Most of the creatures in the void lived in the form of races. The more people there were, the more powerful they were. This was especially true for a race that was so powerful and had so many clansmen. It was simply intimidating. People like Ning Shu could really be said to be pitiful. Ning Shu forced himself to save face. "I think it's good to be alone. It's good to be free." If there were really a lot of people, Ning Shu would not know how to deal with them. The stone golem looked at Ning Shu. "As long as you are happy." The stone golem pointed at a place. "Do you think it's okay to plant it here?" Ning Shu looked at the towering tree next to him. This tree was very big and covered the sky. If he planted this grass next to it, would there still be sunlight and rain? Wouldn't it be completely covered by the tree? Ning Shu shook his head. "I don't think so." The stone golem tilted his head and looked at Ning Shu. "Why not? Don't underestimate this tree. This tree is also the birthplace of a plane. There are only benefits and no disadvantages to having life next to it." Ning Shu looked at the towering tree. The birthplace of a plane. This tree was quite similar to the world tree. One flower, one world, one world. The birthplace of a plane existed in all kinds of ways, such as the sea of law, trees, and even sand. The world tree on her was no longer there. Under the strong pressure of the giant hand, everything that should have collapsed on her body had collapsed. She was basically left with nothing. Ning Shu frowned. Will the soul seed absorb the power of the birthplace of the plane next to it? The stone golem scratched his head. How can that be? The reason why the soul seed can have such pure power is because the soul seed will absorb the power from far away. The birthplace of this plane will only benefit from it. Ning Shu nodded. Could it be that this soul seed was similar to the spirit gathering array and had the ability to condense the surrounding spiritual energy? In that case, there was no need to worry about affecting the two of them. Ning Shu looked at the towering tree. It's rare to be able to grow like this without being damaged. The stone golem said, any living being with some intelligence would not destroy this kind of thing. After all, gods have their divine path and ants have their ant path. They do not interfere with each other. As for the living beings living inside, they do not interfere with each other. If the little mouse passed by with its army, it would definitely be gnawed clean. After all, that kind of living being only had food in its mind. Ning Shu began to dig a hole. Such a big soul seed had to be dug a big hole. Now that he thought about it, Ning Shu admired himself. But how did he pull it out? After planting the soul seed, Ning Shu was already panting. He was completely exhausted. This body was really too weak. What could he do to improve it? Now that he had a body, could he continue to cultivate the peerless martial arts? Go back and cultivate the peerless martial arts. Perhaps getting some faith for the peerless martial arts could make its situation better. Ning Shu was too tired to walk on his own. He jumped onto Mountain's hand. Mountain placed Ning Shu on his shoulder and prepared to return to the divine rock race's territory. A gentle breeze blew past, causing the leaves to rustle. The leaves shook violently. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-36. Ning Shu lay weakly on Shan Yu's back. She saw the tree's leaves trembling and rustling. Ning Shu was very tired now. She retracted her gaze after a glance and fell asleep on Mountain's back. When Mountain returned to the divine stone race, Ning Shu had already fallen into a coma and slept for a long time. The stone men who had been sleeping for a long time felt that something was wrong. They turned Ning Shu over and over again to study her, but they could not figure out anything. After all, they had never encountered such a weak cub before. Although a newborn cub of the divine stone race was also very weak, it could still use its fist to knock over a bird and uproot a tree. As expected, there was no way to raise a weak cub. Sigh. The helpless stone men could only watch Ning Shu sleep. When Ning Shu woke up, she did not have any strength in her body. The stone men picked some fruits from outside and piled them beside her. When Ning Shu woke up, many stone men came over and looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu felt that she was so tired and her body was in so much pain. It was probably because she had used too much strength to pull out the life soul. Her body was exhausted and she did not have any strength left. It was not that she did not have strength, but the price to pay for using strength was very high. Moreover, eating the nectar had increased the burden on her body. It was like a baby eating meat, unable to digest it, causing her body to feel even more uncomfortable. After waking up, Ning Shu did not have any strength in her body. Every day, she would lie on a huge rock like a pancake, flipping one side over and over again. She was like a salted fish. If she knew this would happen, she would not have used up her strength like this. The stone men gathered together and mumbled something. Ning Shu did not care what they said. Mountain came over and said to Ning Shu, "Nectar, do you still have any more nectar?" Ning Shu did not realize that the nectar was calling her. She casually pointed at a place, "It's over there. You can take it yourselves." Right now, Ning Shu had no appetite for this food at all. It was probably because she had eaten too much previously that she felt a little uncomfortable. She smacked her lips and still felt the sweetness in her mouth. Fation probably liked to eat these things, but where was Fation now? The void was so big that it was hard to find him. Anyway, she wouldn't eat this in the future. She would leave some for Fation. The stone man took out a jar of nectar and said to Ning Shu, I need to take one jar out. Ning Shu waved her hand nonchalantly. She couldn't stand the smell now. She was hurt. Shan Yu took a small jar of nectar and left. The other stone golems told him, come back quickly, don't get lost. Ning Shu was curious as to why Shan Yu had gone out. However, she was too tired to be curious. Thinking about things took a lot of effort. Ning Shu thought that he might as well go to sleep. Sleeping was useless anyway. Ning Shu thought that he might as well cultivate some peerless martial arts. Ning Shu was very familiar with the cultivation method of peerless martial arts. It was as familiar as if it had been integrated into his bones and blood. However, when he tried to circulate his qi, his body hurt so much that he couldn't even cultivate peerless martial arts. Ning Shu clenched her fists. She wouldn't let go of the taishu. Maybe it was because his body was too weak now, or maybe it was because his body was overdrawn. It was not suitable for him to cultivate peerless martial arts. What else could he do? He could only sleep. Ning Shu lay on the stone and began to sleep. In his sleep, he felt a chill invade his body. It was quite comfortable and he felt that his body had some strength. Ning Shu opened his eyes and saw a man. Seeing this person, Ning Shu sat up. It's you. The man raised his eyebrows. You know me? Ning Shu laughed. I don't know you. I was just dreaming. When I opened my eyes, I didn't react. This man, to be precise, was a fish. He was a carp that had roamed the sea of law for many days. He didn't know if his current body was a flower or a black one. This time, he was alone. He didn't know what method he used to make Ning Shu's situation better. Could it be that the carp was a doctor? A void creature's doctor? If he was sick, he would look for the carp. Shan Yu took a jar of nectar as medical expenses. If that was the case, Ning Shu felt that he would have to deal with this race a lot in the future. The carp said, I have already given her some blessings and faith to make her situation better. However, her physique is weak. These faith and blessings will be consumed quickly. Treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Ning Shu said, thank you, sir. The carp nodded and said in a formulaic tone, don't overuse your power. Your body has traces of the world's faith power. Ning Shu, what was the world's faith power? Ning Shu had never come into contact with it. He had heard of faith power. After all, when intelligent creatures believed sincerely, faith power would be born. But what was the world's faith power? The carp looked up and down at Ning Shu and said, why don't you join our organization? Your physique is suitable to accept the world's faith power. It can improve your physique. As soon as Ning Shu heard the word organization, his mind buzzed. He shouted sharply, no, I won't, never. No one present expected Ning Shu to have such a big reaction. Her facial features were distorted, her voice was sharp, and her whole body was full of resistance. The stone man looked at Ning Shu holding his head and said, if you don't want to go, then don't go. Why are you so agitated? Ning Shu came back to her senses and said with a pale face, I'm sorry. I was too agitated and scared you. The stone men looked at the carp in unison. The carp twitched the corner of his mouth. She's probably sick. The stone man was a little worried. Then what's wrong with her? The carp said uncertainly, it's probably a mental illness. Ning Shu felt that she might also be suffering from a mental illness. At least for now, that organization was still in existence that she could not let go of. This was undeniable. Perhaps with the passage of time, she could slowly become indifferent. Of course, she still had to take revenge. However, Ning Shu was more concerned about another thing, which was the world's faith power. If the world's faith power could improve his physique, he might have to give it a try. Ning Shu said to the stone man, "Shan Yu, please get another jar of nectar for this gentleman." Shan Yu looked at Ning Shu and the carp, turned around and got another jar. Fortunately, there was a lot of nectar. Otherwise, he would not be able to bear giving it away like this. Ning Shu took the nectar from Shan Yu's hand and handed it to the carp. He said sincerely, "Sir, can you tell me more about the world's faith power? I was just born not long ago, so I don't know much about it." The carp looked at the nectar, took it and said, "You really don't know? In fact, you have the world's faith power, but it's very, very little." To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 39-38. It was a pity for her world tree. The world tree was so lush, and many worlds were about to give birth to life. If she entered the world tree's world and helped the world, she might be able to get a lot of faith power. But there was nothing left, so it was useless to talk about this. The stone man was dizzy and asked Ning Shu to stop spinning. "What's wrong?" Ning Shu touched her chin and thought about life. "I want to grow up, I want to change my physique, I want to become beautiful, I want to become strong, I want to do whatever she wanted." She heard that you can do whatever you want when you become strong. The stone man, and then? There's no then. Such a big tree didn't even have a leaf that needed help. That was too illogical. Ning Shu was a little depressed and wanted to complain. Just as she was about to speak, a white light flashed in front of her eyes. She covered her eyes reflexively. "Fuck, my eyes." Then, she entered a dark place. It was so quiet that she couldn't see her fingers. Ning Shu's voice was trembling. "Fuck, my eyes are blinded." Otherwise, why couldn't she see anything? Ning Shu whispered, "Shan Yu." Only Ning Shu's voice could be heard in the quiet space. Although she didn't know why it was suddenly dark, Ning Shu was very cautious and released her spiritual power to check the surroundings. Suddenly, a white light hit her. Ning Shu quickly covered her eyes. What was going on? Was it trying to blind her eyes? She opened her fingers and saw a movie screen in front of her. Unfortunately, the image was very rough and it was a silent black and white image. Ning Shu put down her hand and looked at the image. As she looked, Ning Shu laughed out loud. Although it was a little unnatural, she couldn't help it. She was also very happy because she was finally going to open her business. A world had found her. The world in the image was barren. It was obvious that the people in this world were not living very well. Their clothes were dusty, and their faces were dark. But in this barren world, there were a few girls who were like fresh flowers, making this black and white image look good. One mushroom was the life of a koi. Although it wasn't a real koi like the koi was used to describe one's luck. In an era when resources were scarce, one could catch big fish by walking along the river. Rabbits, pheasants, and wild boars would bump into one's arms in the mountains. A young lady had a large space. Inside the space, there was a spirit spring and soil. Everything grew faster and tasted better than outside. There was also Mushroom Cold who was reborn. She was going to lead her family on the road to riches once again at a poor age. There was also Mushroom who had transmigrated from another world. He was a doctor. In this world where medical conditions were extremely backward, doctors were a rare resource. This kind of mushroom would be the Heavenly Tao's darling in any world, but there were so many Heavenly Tao's darling gathered in one world. Moreover, they were all concentrated in one production team. It was like the 8 immortals crossing the sea, each showing their own magical powers. If there were women, there would be men. On the men's side, the distribution was uneven. Outstanding men were all popular goods, and it was inevitable that there would be all kinds of conflicts. Each of these people had their own fate, and at this time, it was a matter of whose fate was stronger. Ning Shu rubbed his chin as he looked at the contents of the screen. He pondered in his heart. It was probably because there were too many people with fate in a world, and it was a huge burden to the world. If the heavenly Tao's blessings for living beings were limited, then this world had severely overdrawn its blessings. It was like there were too many children at home that needed to be raised. They couldn't handle it and ate until they were poor. So her mission was, moreover, she didn't have a soul now, so how was she going to do it? The strong sense of weightlessness made Ning Shu feel as if he had been thrown off a plane. When the tips of his feet touched the ground, it was very painful. When he opened his eyes, he realized that he had arrived in this world with his back facing the sky. At a glance, he saw many people bending over to harvest wheat. The sun was so hot that it was difficult to open one's eyes. Ning Shu was also sweating profusely from the heat as he stood on the crooked muddy road. At this time, the people's enthusiasm for production was very high, but they had no choice but to be high. After all, if they were lazy, they would be criticized and drag the group down. Ning Shu pinched his own face and looked at his own hands. He realized that he had entered this world with his own body. Previously, he had fought with others, and there were scars on his hands. There were spots of purple that had not dissipated, and there were still scars on his hands. He looked at himself in the river. His face was still the same, but his face was black and yellow. It was not white and tender in the void. The clothes he was wearing were also full of patches. He carried a basket in his hand, and inside it was wild grass that had been baked by the sun. It was very suitable for the image of a child from a poor family. After all, many people nowadays had such an image. And it was still okay. In the past, he had entered other people's bodies. Now, it was his own body. He was now recognized by this world as a native, but he didn't know which family's child was arranged for him. There were several mushrooms, and he didn't know which one she was arranged to be with. Ning Shu carried the basket and walked slowly. The sun was too strong. Someone come and bring him home. Xiaoya, why are you still outside? Hurry and come home. A middle-aged woman stood in front of a door and waved at Ning Shu. Ning Shu sighed. He carried the basket and ran in the direction of the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman took the basket from Ning Shu's hand and used her sleeve to wipe Ning Shu's face. Her sleeve carried the smell of smoke from the stove. Clearly, this middle-aged woman was cooking. Ning Shu wanted to use the toilet. He went to the backyard. The toilets in the countryside were all built at the back. He saw a mushroom who was fiddling with some mysterious things. From the information he had obtained previously, Ning Shu matched her face with a name. The reincarnated girl, Hongxiao. She stuffed some wild fruits into the jar and added a lot of white sugar. White sugar was considered a precious thing in this era. Only when a guest came to the house would they add some sugar to plain water. Adding so much really made one's heart ache. Li Hongxiao secretly saw Ning Shu staring at her. Li Hongxiao hurriedly gestured to Ning Shu to shut up. Li Hongxiao walked to Ning Shu and covered her mouth. Don't tell anyone. When the time comes, I'll give you something to eat. Ning Shu nodded. She looked at Li Hongxiao with a pair of bright eyes. She liked to fiddle with things and wanted to rely on her foresight to walk in front. Ning Shu nodded and said softly, I won't say. Li Hongxiao didn't take the 4 or 5-year-old cousin seriously. After all, she was invisible and didn't have any sense of existence. After being reborn, Li Hongxiao was confused for a moment when she saw that she had a 4 or 5-year-old cousin. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3939. Did she have a cousin? Didn't second uncle only have 2 sons? Li Hongxiao thought about it and was still worried. She stuffed a fruit candy into Ning Shu's mouth. Don't talk nonsense. Ning Shu used his tongue to push the candy around in his mouth. It was sweet, but Ning Shu didn't want to eat sweet things at all. Li Hongxiao dug a hole and buried the jar. After a while, something good would come out. Ning Shu looked at Li Hongxiao. Although he had a prophet after his rebirth, just having a prophet was far from enough. After all, he had to take action. Whatever Li Hongxiao did, she would succeed. And behind this success, she had to exhaust her luck again and again. There were too many people with great luck. After burying the jar, Li Hongxiao patted the soil off her hands and brought Ning Shu to the front yard. She repeatedly reminded Ning Shu not to say anything about her burying the jar. Ning Shu pressed a piece of candy under his tongue and couldn't say anything. He nodded. When he was washing his hands, there was a burst of noise outside the yard. It was mixed with the sound of loud voices. The Zhang family caught a wild boar. That wild boar is very fat. It's almost 200 pounds. Its fangs are as long as chopsticks. When they heard meat, everyone's face showed a covetous look. In this era, food and clothing were problems. Everyone thought that meat was a luxury. Having some oil in the stomach was the greatest pursuit. To be able to catch a wild boar that was almost 200 pounds, how much oil was that? Even if they ate some pig offal, there would be some oil in their stomach. However, everyone was very happy. Because now, everything was collective. If they caught some small fish or prawns, it would be their own. But this 200-pound big fat boar would definitely be collective. This meant that each family would be able to get 1 or 2 pounds of meat to fill their stomachs with some oil. Ning Shu stood at the entrance of the yard and looked at a large group of men dragging the dead wild boar. This wild boar was really big, and its whole body was covered with thick black hair. It had a strong fishy smell. Actually, the smell of a wild boar was unpleasant, but no one felt that the smell was unpleasant. This was meat. The Zhang family's mushroom girl, Zhang Qingqing, was 15 or 16 years old. She was white and tender, and her skin was white. Compared to the black and yellow around her, her skin was even whiter. Ning Shu followed the large group to the dam. Everyone gathered around and marveled at such a big wild boar. If it went crazy, it would definitely pierce through people's stomachs. He didn't know how much strength he had. Zhang Qingqing took her brothers and sisters into the mountains. Just like that, they encountered a wild boar running out of the forest. When the children saw the ferocious wild boar, they were stunned. Who would have thought that the wild boar would be blind? It angrily rammed into a tree, and with a bang, its brain almost burst out. The wild boar fainted just like that. Zhang Qingqing hurriedly asked her brother, who was running fast, to inform the family to come and get it back. What if the wild boar woke up again? When the Zhang family heard that there was a wild boar lying still, they immediately took a rope and tied it up. Because they were going to slaughter the pig, the entire production team seemed to be in a jubilant mood. It was not that they would have meat to eat during the holidays. Many people were eagerly waiting for the meat. The wild boar was fat and strong. When its stomach was cut open, there was a strong stench. But the most delightful thing was that the fat was actually a finger thick. After getting the fat meat, it was good to go back and refine the oil residue. There was very little vegetable oil. Now, they all ate animal oil. No matter how coarse the food was, if they dripped 2 drops of lard, the food would be easier to swallow and more fragrant. After eating some oil, it would be easier to go to the toilet. In this era, there was very little processed food. They ate coarse grains. If there was no oil in their stomach, they would not even be able to poop. So they were simply too happy to be able to get meat. Ning Shu looked at the bloody pig's head on the ground. How lame was this pig to be able to crash into a tree and run out of the forest for people to eat. She then looked at Zhang Qingqing. Her luck was really enviable. She did not need to do anything and it automatically came to her. She did not know what kind of good person she was in her previous life. Ning Shu originally wanted to take a look at Zhang Qingqing's luck. Everyone's luck was different. However, what made Ning Shu stunned was that Zhang Qingqing's luck was white. With such great luck, this kind of koi life was actually white. Generally speaking, one's life was rich and noble. Their luck was usually red and purple. Zhang Qingqing's white color represented ordinary luck. It was not very unlucky, but it was also not a person who was especially favored by the heavenly Tao. Was there a mistake somewhere? Ning Shu changed her target and set her sights on Li Hongxiao. Li Hongxiao's luck was red. Red meant that Li Hongxiao was rich in her life. However, there was also a black line mixed in. It was probably because of her rebirth. More and more villagers came over to share the meat. Ning Shu searched for the other two mushrooms in the crowd. Feng Min was a mushroom who had transmigrated. She was younger than Zhao Hongxiao and Zhang Qingqing. Ning Shu was even more surprised when he saw her luck. This was because Feng Min's luck was mostly white with a hint of purple. Purple generally represented power and authority and was respected by people. However, it was understandable when he thought about how Feng Min was a doctor. Her life providence was something she had. Regardless of whether she had learned medical skills in her previous life or in this life, she had to learn them herself. It was impossible to learn medical skills without reading medical books that reached the ceiling. There was so much medical knowledge that needed to be memorized. As for Zhang Qingqing's koi luck, it was really fleeting. If this luck was gone one day, there would be nothing left. However, when this luck was still there, it was the most comfortable life. After all, the entire world was filled with kindness towards her. Li Zuoyan was a mushroom who had a spirit spring space. She was Li Hongxiao's sister and was her grandfather's brother. Li Zuoyan's luck was mostly white with some red. It was about the same as Li Hongxiao's. Everyone was still young. As for what their future development would be, they had no idea. Life providence also changed with the events that happened. If one were to say who had the best life providence, it would definitely be Feng Min. However, if the world couldn't bear the burden, it meant that the four girls would become even more powerful as they grew up. Their current life providence was nothing. This was the first time Ning Shu had seen such a lively world. There were 4 mushrooms with great luck and one who was loved by everyone. He wasn't loved by everyone, but Tom Su, who was loved by all girls. However, it was just too crowded. That was why the world couldn't bear the burden. Especially when they were squeezed into such a small production team. The invisible interactions between them and the collision of luck would make the world unable to bear it. The impact of this collision was like a vortex that grew larger and larger. Ning Shu was speechless. What's the use of looking for her? The world should separate these people. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3941. Old Master Sun was old and lived in a damp and leaky room. He usually did dirty and tiring work. His body could not take it, and his rheumatism was serious. He was tortured. Old Master Sun could reject meat, but he definitely could not reject a doctor. The pain in his body was unbearable. Therefore, Old Master Sun was more likely to accept Feng Min than Li Hongxiao. Li Hongxiao's food was not necessary for Old Master Sunday. A little food to fill his stomach every day could let him live, but the pain in his body was different. In terms of the battle between the two sides, Feng Min had the upper hand. The two of them snorted at the same time. Feng Min said coldly, "I like to go out at night. What can you do about it? Besides, when did I come out of his room?" "Li Hongxiao, don't accuse me." Li Hongxiao looked at her meaningfully. "I know very well whether you were there or not." "Yes, you and I both know very well." Feng Min brushed her hair, giving off a charming feeling. "Who said outside Old Master Sun's room, Old Master Sun, I brought you some meat. Don't you know what kind of behavior you are doing?" For a moment, both sides were silent. They both had something on each other. Li Hongxiao was angry. She did not know that there was another person in Old Master Sun's room. No wonder Old Master Sun asked her to put the food at the door. Ning Shu felt that he could not let this person go on. They were both consuming the power of the world. If they were ordinary people, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have such a big impact. However, these two people were special. Ning Shu shouted, "Sister Hongxiao, where are you?" Her voice broke the tense atmosphere between the two of them. Ning Shu ran over. Li Hongxiao said to Ning Shu, "Slow down, don't fall. I saw you come out. Why aren't you going back?" "I'm waiting for you at the gate of the courtyard," Ning Shu said. Li Hongxiao said, "I came out to get some mosquito repellent. Let's go back." As she spoke, she took Ning Shu's hand and walked away. After taking 2 steps, she turned back and said to Feng Min, "We didn't see each other today." Feng Min sighed in her heart. "I think so too. I'll go get some mosquito repellent." In the darkness, Li Hongxiao was gnashing her teeth in anger and frustration. It was probably because Old Master Sun didn't let her in and let Feng Min in instead. This made Li Hongxiao quite frustrated and irritated. With Zhu Yu in front, no matter how close she was to Elder Sun, she definitely couldn't compare to Feng Min in Elder Sun's heart. She didn't know how Feng Min got in touch with Elder Sunday Feng Min in her previous life. Feng Min was a very ordinary girl. She had an endless amount of work to do every day. In the countryside, it was normal for men to be preferred over women. If there was a family that doted on their daughter and mistreated their son, that would be unheard of. She was a few years younger than Feng Min, and they didn't usually play together, so she didn't have much contact with Feng Min. However, this Feng Min was somewhat different from the silly girl in her memory. Li Hongxiao paused in her steps. Could it be that Feng Min was also reborn and approached Elder Sun with the same purpose as her? The more Li Hongxiao thought about it, the more she felt that this was the case. She couldn't help but feel irritated. If there was another reborn person, her advantage wouldn't be called an advantage at all. Ning Shu looked at Li Hongxiao and asked, "Sister, what's wrong?" Li Hongxiao probably felt that the child didn't know anything and said, "It's so annoying. Why is it like this? What's the meaning of my life?" If she was reborn, then so be it. What did she mean by incidental? Ning Shu blinked and said, "Of course it's good to be alive. You can run, jump, eat good food, and do many things." She somewhat understood Li Hongxiao's feelings. After her rebirth, she could live better by relying on the Prophet. The goal she set for herself was also more ambitious. It should have been smooth sailing, but now that she had encountered a small setback, she was irritated. In a word, strength couldn't match ambition. This was the source of her pain. If you died and came back to life, what would you do? Li Hongxiao asked softly. Ning Shu thought for a moment. Me? I don't know. Then I'll live well. After all, it wasn't easy to survive. To be able to come back to life was the greatest fortune. Actually, Li Hongxiao and Ning Shu's situation was not much different. After waking up, Ning Shu didn't set any ambitious goals for himself. He would do whatever he wanted. Instead, he worked hard to make himself relaxed and happy. He didn't want to live the busy days of the past anymore. Being alive was a gain. Li Hongxiao sighed. Why am I telling a child like you all this? You don't know what I'm thinking. Ning Shu also sighed. It was nothing more than his previous life being too ordinary. In this life, he had to become extraordinary. From ordinary to extraordinary, there were too many things to go through. How big of a setback was this? Dinner was an oily stew. In any case, it was white fat meat stewed with some vegetables and vermicelli. This was originally a bit greasy, but for people who lacked oil in their stomachs all year round, it was a rare delicacy. Ning Shu just slowly drank the cornmeal porridge and piles of sweet potatoes. He didn't eat any meat or vegetables. Li Hongxiao looked at the simple and crude stew on the table. She couldn't eat it and didn't pick up any food. Without a separation, everyone ate from the same pot. It was really not up to her to decide how to cook the food. Li Hongxiao's heart ached for these ingredients. They could have been made better, but they ended up like this. Now, Li Hongxiao was thinking about separating from the family. After separating from the family, she would have the freedom to eat. Moreover, she would definitely do business in the future. Without a separation, others would not agree at all. Moreover, even if she made money, it would be a mess of bad debts. Her grandparents were the kind of people who robbed the rich to help the poor. If a child was doing well, they would feel sorry for the poor child and help the poor child. She was really not used to such a big family, but it was not up to a little girl like her to talk about separating from the family. However, her parents were not the kind of people who were disobedient and unfilial. If she talked about separating from the family, they would definitely be angry. However, Li Hongxiao really didn't like this situation. No matter what, she had to hand over everything to her grandparents. Where could she find startup capital? Previously, she had used a little white sugar. When her grandmother found out, she scolded her. She thought that the child in the family secretly ate the white sugar. Li Hongxiao didn't dare to say anything and let her scold her. She was really annoyed. Ning Shu chewed on the soft sweet potato and found that her face was full of annoyance and depression. Between her eyebrows was a knot that couldn't be untied. In fact, sometimes things in the future were not necessarily a good thing, because she had to compare the future with herself. Once the comparison was made, it was easy to lose mental balance and feel especially uncomfortable. Ning Shu had also experienced such things. If she couldn't adjust her mental state, it would be very painful. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3942. The goal was too vague, and the current situation made it difficult to move an inch. That feeling was too unbearable. Therefore, he should not set such a big goal for himself. When the time came, he would be the one suffering. Just like Ning Shu's current goal was to repair his body as much as possible. If he really could not repair it, it was not impossible to live a leisurely life. If he could repair it, he could take revenge. If he could not repair it, then he would live a peaceful life. He could not give himself too much pressure. Now that there was no number of missions and no pressure to kill, Ning Shu was happy to be a salted fish. Li Hongxiao was giving him too much pressure. To be able to start over was indeed a great blessing. Moreover, Li Hongxiao was an ordinary person. Don't get into a dead end and go against Feng Min. Compared to the two, Feng Min was hardcore and had medical skills. Although Li Hongxiao was not very clear about the details of the situation, she still knew the general direction. Li Hongxiao, on the other hand, had nothing in her hands. She was an ordinary farmer's girl. Ning Shu felt that he was worrying too much. Was it not good to live peacefully, dear? The next day, Li Hongxiao was full of energy again. It seemed that she had thought it through, but Feng Min just had to come over again. When Li Hongxiao saw Feng Min, she felt very uncomfortable. She pulled a long face. Why are you looking for me? Didn't I say that it's best if we don't interact? Li Hongxiao looked at Feng Min inch by inch and found that Feng Min was clean. Even her shoes were brushed clean. Her little face was clean after washing, and her hair was combed very well. It was fluffy but not messy. It could be seen that her hair was not dirty. Many children did not wash their hair for a long time, so their hair was dirty and dusty. Regardless of whether something looked good or not, even if it was patched, as long as it was clean, it would not be ugly. When Li Hongxiao looked at Feng Min, her heart was in turmoil. Feng Min's self-control and self-discipline were the kind of spiritual world that transcended food and clothing. It was not something a child should have at all. As far as she knew, Feng Min's family was not rich. They were so poor that they struggled with food and clothing. They could not even reach food and clothing. Then, Feng Min was definitely not the original Feng Min. She was very unhappy. Of course, Li Hongxiao would not casually ask the other party, lest she expose herself. Feng Min said to Li Hongxiao, "Let's talk in the field." Li Hongxiao followed Feng Min. She wanted to see what Feng Min wanted to say to her. Ning Shu, what was he doing? It had only been one night, and the two of them were meeting again. Ning Shu could see with his naked eyes that the two of them were competing with their inner strength. He suddenly understood why this world was looking for him. It was really tiring. Ning Shu also followed. When they looked over, Ning Shu played with the mud on the ground. Feng Min said to Li Hongxiao, "I'll tell you the truth. I actually know a little about massage. Mr. Sun is not in good health. He has serious rheumatism and muscle soreness. Get something for elder Sun to eat. You know that my family is very poor. If I treat elder Sun's illness, we can cooperate." Feng Min felt that the safest thing was to have a community of interests. If two people had the same purpose and goal, they would not betray each other. Li Hongxiao looked at Feng Min indifferently. "How do you know how to massage? Where did you learn it? No one in your family studied medicine. I've never heard of you having medical skills before." She was sure that this was not the original Feng Min, just like her, or she was not Feng Min at all. In her memory, the future Feng Min was not a doctor either. Li Hongxiao's expression changed. In this era where feudal superstitions were abolished, Feng Min's situation really made Li Hongxiao a little scared. This was simply a lonely ghost possessing her. It was too scary. Li Hongxiao was a little afraid that this lonely ghost would do something to her. Feng Min was also helpless. She originally wanted to learn some medical skills from the barefoot doctor in the village so that she could have a complete explanation. However, when she told her family, everyone objected. They even said that she was a girl and had a wild heart. She even wanted to learn to be a barefoot doctor. Not to mention that the doctors in the medical center would not accept a girl, it was simply a dream to use this excuse not to work. In this backward and ignorant era, Feng Min also found it difficult to move an inch. She was even discovered when she secretly treated a patient. Li Hongxiao felt that she had to calm Feng Min down first and not let this lonely ghost discover her situation. She coughed and said, "Then that's it." Feng Min nodded. "Then let's high-five as an oath." Li Hongxiao hesitated for a moment. She quickly high-fived Feng Min and withdrew her hand. She wiped her palms behind her back. She high-fived a ghost. After Feng Min left, Li Hongxiao was trembling all over. Ning Shu walked over and asked, "Sister, what's wrong?" Li Hongxiao wiped the sweat on her face and said reluctantly, "It's okay." She had seen a ghost. Then what about the original Feng Min? Was she eaten by this lonely ghost? Li Hongxiao was now in a difficult position. If she fell out with Feng Min, she did not know what that ghost would do. But if she pretended to be polite like this, who knew what would happen to her? Feng Min probably did not expect that her bottom line was seen through by a girl. It was probably because Li Hongxiao was still young that she let down her guard. In the end, she underestimated Li Hongxiao. She did not expect that Li Hongxiao's core was also an adult. Ning Shu frowned and thought about this matter from the beginning to the end. First, the Koi ordered Zhang Qingqing to bring back a wild boar. Li Hongxiao, who got the meat, secretly gave some to Old Sunday. And Feng Min happened to be treating Old Sunday. A mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers, let alone so many tigers. This matter involved 3 people. The only one who was not involved was Li Tsueyin. Li Tsueyin, who had a space. To be honest, among the four people, Ning Shu felt that Li Tsueyin's space was the most dangerous. Wild systems and spaces had an ultimate goal, which was to absorb the law of luck of the world they were in. They were like parasites. The other three absorbed by one person, but Li Tsueyin had a space and a person. In such an age of chaos, there was very little spiritual energy between heaven and earth. There was a spirit spring in that space, which was a bit abnormal. This kind of spiritual energy must have been absorbed by the world. And it was unknown how long such a space had existed. Li Tsueyin was very low-key. She had never mentioned this thing to anyone. She ate secretly and did not think about using the space to do anything. But now the situation was tense. When the policy was relaxed, Li Tsueyin could rely on the space to develop. She would definitely develop better than the other three. With a drop of spirit spring, the food she made would be better than others. Who could withstand this kind of crushing competitiveness? Wealth and providence would only increase. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile phone address. Chapter 39-43. Ning Shu patted his head. In fact, the most important thing to solve was Li Tsueyin's space. As for the other three, let's talk about them later. Li Tsueyin's space was a thumb-sized snow-white snail pendant. Except for its snow-white body, there was nothing eye-catching about this pendant. She carried the space with her everywhere. It was a special treasure. It was impossible to get the space from her hands. She didn't even tell her family about it and never revealed it. She always stuffed it in her clothes. How could he get something as important as her life? And now Li Tsueyin was connected to the space, at least in the spiritual direction. Even if the rope fell, it wouldn't be lost. He didn't know if this kind of space would let the owner die of old age, or if it would let the owner's soul go to the afterlife. Ning Shu encountered some systems and spaces that would absorb the owner's soul after the owner died. Regarding the relationship between the space and the host, it wasn't about who was the master and who was the puppet. It seemed that because of the space, some people's lives were very different. They could have anything they wanted. They had money, power, and fame. But in other words, the host was more like a puppet that relied on the space to live. After all, there was no free lunch in the world. There was no such thing as a free pie. Ning Shu thought about whether he could cut off the connection between the space and Li Tsueyin. If there was no connection, the space would probably give up on Li Tsueyin and look for a new host. It was just that the resources in the space, a large area of land, and even some ancient paintings, antiques, and so on, were all gone. Obviously, this space had more than one host. This kind of space was a closed place that others couldn't detect. It was an absolutely safe place. With the accumulation of generations, the wealth inside was really a lot. Now was the time to get rid of the old. These paintings, antiques, and even gold were considered the old. Li Tsueyin didn't dare to take them out. But with the passage of time, it would usher in a golden age. Antiques were not a joke. At that time, the people would realize wealth, and these things would be hot goods. Even if Li Tsueyin didn't have any startup capital, selling some antiques could make her stand on the finish line. To be honest, this feeling was really cool. Who didn't want to succeed without spending money? Ning Shu intended to get close to Li Tsueyin. Although he was related to Li Tsueyin, he didn't have much contact with her. Li Tsueyin's family's situation wasn't very good either. Everyone was having a hard time. However, now that Li Tsueyin has the space, she can make more meals for her family and secretly make some spiritual spring water for them to drink. Planting vegetables and grains on a large piece of land could also make the family's lives slightly better. Now, everything was done in groups. Everyone worked together to earn work points. Li Tsueyu's space had a huge advantage because there was a large piece of land. There were no restrictions on raising these animals. Now that there were strict restrictions, if they raised too many of them, they would be poaching the Socialist Foundation. Ning Shu said to his cousin, Li Hongxiao, "Sis, I want to play with Tsueji." Tsueji was Li Tsueyan's younger sister. Li Hongxiao had been absent-minded for the past few days. She didn't send anything to Elder Sunday occasionally, she would sneak out at night. She squatted not far from Old Man Sun's house. When she returned, her expression was particularly ugly. Because Feng Min often went in and out of Elder Sun's room, Li Hongxiao felt a strong sense of loss and fear. Feng Min was a ghost. Li Hongxiao wanted to rush over and shake Elder Sun to stay away from her. Don't believe her. She was a ghost. To be honest, Li Hongxiao really wanted to deal with Feng Min and report her to Elder Sunday. However, Li Hongxiao was afraid of breaking the vases. Because of Elder Sun's identity, if Elder Sun was rehabilitated in the future and regained his identity, he would definitely take revenge on her. Wouldn't it be as simple as killing an ant? If she reported it, it would definitely implicate Elder Sunday. She would have to drag Elder Sun out again. At that time, Elder Sun would definitely have a bad impression of her. However, Feng Min made her feel like a fishbone was stuck in her throat. If she reported it, Feng Min might not be able to tell anyone about her sending things. She wouldn't be able to get away with it. It was simply too difficult. Ning Shu called his cousin again. "Sis, I'm going to play with Tsueji. Are you coming?" Her state made Ning Shu very worried. He was worried that the two children would bump into each other again. Li Hongxiao obviously found that Feng Min was abnormal. Feng Min had relaxed and thought that she had reached a consensus after negotiating with Li Hongxiao. It was likely that they had reached a consensus unilaterally. It was obvious from the fact that Li Hongxiao hadn't sent anything over recently. However, Feng Min ran to Elder Sun's place in the middle of the night. If these children didn't bump into each other, their luck wouldn't be depleted so quickly. Li Hongxiao came back to her senses. "Go ahead. Don't go to the water." As she spoke, she picked up the sickle and carried the basket on her back to cut the pigweed. Even though Li Hongxiao's heart was filled with thoughts and ideas, she still had to do this work. Ning Shu arrived at Li Tsueyan's house. Li Tsueyan was feeding 2 chickens. Ning Shu looked at the chicken coop. The 2 hens' feathers were especially smooth and bright. They were especially energetic. If it weren't for the lack of a comb, they would look like valiant and energetic roosters. "Sister Tsueyan, your chickens are growing really well." Li Tsueyan looked at Ning Shu's little sister and asked her sister to play with Ning Shu. Obviously, she didn't want to play with the overly immature Ning Shu. Li Tsueji was about the same age as Ning Shu. Previously, due to malnutrition, her hair was sparse and withered. Recently, her condition seemed to be much better, and her face was a little chubbier. In a way, that space seemed to be an existence that sacrificed itself for others. The spirit spring inside could be used freely. The space could be used freely. Anything important could be placed inside. The space allowed the owner and the people around the owner to benefit. It was no wonder that the owner would carefully protect it. Ning Shu played childish games with Li Tsueji while looking at the busy Li Tsueyan. Ning Shu ran over to help grab the basket and said, "Sister Tsueyan, let me help you." When he touched Li Tsueyan's hand, Ning Shu's consciousness followed Li Tsueyan's hand and drifted to the pendant. Li Tsueyan retracted her hand and said coldly, "No need, you go play with Tsueji." "Oh," Ning Shu replied and turned to play with Li Tsueji. That consciousness rested on the pendant, but it couldn't do anything to the pendant. Even if this space was just a space, there were still space walls. It wasn't easy to enter at all. He didn't know how long this space was and how easy it would be to deal with it. After playing for an hour, Ning Shu said goodbye to Li Tsueji. Before he left, he said to Li Tsueji, "Tsueji, you look better now. You've become fairer. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3944. Li Tsueji was small and innocent. She asked with stars in her eyes, really? Have I really become prettier? Even a child would want to become prettier. Ning Shu nodded. You really have. Your sister has also become prettier. Li Tsueji was interrupted by her sister before she could finish. Li Tsuelan said to Ning Shu, I told her not to go out in the sun, so she's a little fairer. You have to play with her less in the future. She needs to take a nap at noon. Ning Shu nodded. Okay. After walking away, Ning Shu could still hear the intermittent conversation between the sisters. Play with her less in the future. Don't interact with Third Grandpa's family. Third Grandpa was referring to Ning Shu and Li Hongxiao's grandfather. Why, sister? There's no why. Just be obedient. I'll make vinegar cabbage for you tonight. Li Tsueyin was very cautious. Even if it was a child like Ning Shu, she was very careful. When Ning Shu returned home, his cousin, Li Hongxiao, was carrying a big basket of pigweed. She was exhausted. When she saw the leisurely Ning Shu, she couldn't help but say, You're so lucky. You run around and play every day. Ning Shu said, Then I'll go harvest pigweed with sister next time. Don't. If you can't do it well, I'll have to watch over you. Don't find things for me to do. Li Tsueyin refused without thinking. If she wasn't careful and the child ran away and fell into the ditch, her parents would eat her up. She wasn't her biological sister. Why did she have to bring her along? In the dead of night, Ning Shu wanted to use that consciousness to enter the space. However, her power was now suppressed by the heavenly Tao. She couldn't even use the spatial laws. This was an ordinary world to begin with. It was impossible for Ning Shu to enter this world with the power to destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth with a single punch. Ning Shu's consciousness suffered a violent backlash from the space. It probably sensed the danger and desperately rejected Ning Shu's consciousness. This made it difficult for Ning Shu's consciousness to move. It was much more difficult for him to crack this space from the inside. Li Tsueyin slept very uncomfortably because the pendant on her chest was boiling hot. It was so hot that she couldn't sleep. She took the pendant off and didn't know what to do. With such a high temperature, wouldn't the chicken, duck, and fish inside die? What happened to the space? The space was Li Tsueyin's lifeblood. It allowed her and her family to live a better life. If she didn't have the space, Li Tsueyin wouldn't know what to do. It is easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. Li Tsueyin wanted to enter the space, but she found that the space rejected her entry. In the past, she could enter the space with just a thought. Now that she couldn't enter, Li Tsueyin was completely dumbfounded. Her scalp went numb, and her first reaction was that the sky had collapsed. The reason why Li Tsueyin couldn't enter the space was very simple. It was because the space had sensed an invader. This invader wanted to break through the space's barrier. At this time, the space had to close the door to prevent the invader from entering. Once the door was closed, no one could enter, including Li Tsueyin, the host. The space activated its self-protection mode. When this crisis was over, Li Tsueyin could enter again. But Li Tsueyin didn't know what happened to the space. Why she couldn't enter the space all of a sudden. Things outside couldn't be taken in, and things inside couldn't be taken out. She was used to the convenience brought by the space. Without the space, how could she live? Especially the spiritual spring inside, and the things she hid in the space. Without good food, how could she grow white and tender, tall and slender? The benefits brought by the spiritual spring were obvious. Li Tsueyin held the scalding hot space. She was so anxious that tears fell out. She tried to calm down. How could she help the space now? Li Tsueyun got out of bed, scooped up a scoop of cold water, and threw the scalding hot space into the water. She hoped that this could cool down the space. She hoped that the space would be fine. Otherwise, this barren life would be too hard to endure. If she didn't get the space, everyone would live the same life, and it wouldn't matter. But after enjoying it and then losing it, it was as painful as digging out her heart. Getting what she wanted was of course happy, but the most painful thing was to lose what she had and never be able to have it again. Li Tsueyun didn't sleep all night. She stared blankly at the scoop, constantly changing the water for the space. But the space was always scalding hot. Li Tsueyun wanted to cry. She begged in her heart. Nothing must happen to the space. Absolutely nothing. How could she live without the space? She couldn't live. Ning Shu also couldn't attack the space for a long time. This space had the ability to defend itself. Perhaps it could really absorb enough laws and spiritual energy, and then it could form a world. In fact, forming a world of living beings was a good thing. But this kind of space was like a parasite. It relied on absorbing the fate of the world of living beings to strengthen itself. At first, she thought that entering the space with her own body might be slightly stronger than entering the space with her soul. After all, the soul entered an ordinary body. But she didn't expect that the suppression would be so strong. She wanted to enter the space and directly break through the space's wall, releasing the spiritual energy inside and returning it to the world. It was impossible for the space to have spiritual energy for no reason. Energy was conserved. If there was more here, there would be less there. But she couldn't enter. But Ning Shu found that at the same time that he couldn't enter, Li Tsueyun also couldn't enter. In this way, half of the goal was achieved. After a long time, either Li Tsueyun gave up on this useless space, or the space gave up on the host. The sealed space also didn't absorb the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. The laws were already destiny. Ning Shu used his consciousness to disturb the space from time to time, so that the space would always be in a sealed state. But this made Li Tsueyun anxious. The space had been closed to her, and the quality of her life had dropped a lot. In the past, she could casually make any food or spiritual spring and it would taste good. But without the spirit spring, how could he casually make something that tasted good? What was the point of having a chef if it was so simple? She could make good food randomly, so what was the point of learning cooking? Li Tsueyun's family also felt that their life was a little different. In the past, they were always full of energy. They didn't feel tired doing the same work before, but now they felt very tired. The food at home didn't taste good. If they forced themselves to eat other things, it would be a little painful. Anyway, the family atmosphere wasn't very harmonious. As the cook, Li Tsueyun couldn't avoid being criticized. They said that Li Tsueyun didn't cook as carefully as before. She casually made food, regardless of whether the taste was good or not. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3945. Li Tsueyun felt so wrong that she wanted to cry. If she had known earlier, she would have brought out more spirit spring water. She never thought that anything would happen to the space. It was not safe to bring out more spirit spring water. If she wanted spirit spring water, she could go in and get it at any time. But now that there was a problem with the space, she was anxious, and her family was still blaming her. This made Li Tsueyun feel that her heart, which was full of thinking for her family, was eaten by a dog. But even if there was a problem with the space, Li Tsueyun did not intend to tell her family. Such a shocking thing, no one would believe her. Especially now that the space was broken, it was even more impossible to prove. Maybe the space would be fine. Li Tsueyun tried to enter the space many times every day, but it was still not working. The space was always boiling hot. Li Tsuiyin felt that the livestock raised in the space might have died from the heat. And the vegetables planted in it, sigh. She also could not eat the food she cooked. In fact, these dishes were not bad. It was not to the point that she could not eat, but compared to before, it was too tragic. Li Tsuiyin was in a very bad mood. She was silent. Her family saw her like this and were a little worried. They grabbed her and asked if something had happened. Li Tsuiyin said that she was fine, but her family did not believe it. No one at the table complained that the food was not good. After all, the person who cooked was in a bad mood. Ning Shu conquered the space day after day, but the space wall of this space was really thick. And Ning Shu could not use the space law now. He could only rely on his brother's consciousness to slowly grind it day by day. It was good enough if he could sense the danger in the space. This way, the space could not be used. When Ning Shu was wholeheartedly fighting the space, a big thing happened in the production team. That was, someone found that Feng Min was in contact with Elder Sun, who lived in the cowshed. And she was caught. And it looked like they were waiting for her. Feng Min was caught just like that. This matter caused a huge uproar and attracted the attention of the production team. After all, at this sensitive time, an Elder Sun had such a sensitive identity. Usually, no one dared to get close to Elder Sunday. When they heard that Feng Min was in contact with Elder Sun, they were all very surprised. Then, a look of disdain appeared on their faces. Even the Feng family did not expect their daughter to be so daring as to receive such strange looks from others. When Ning Shu heard this news, she was stunned. During this period of time, all her attention was on that wisp of consciousness. She tossed and turned in bed at night and stared blankly with her chin propped up during the day. She had no time to pay attention to Feng Min's affairs. Feng Min had underestimated the cruelty of this era. Everyone had to be careful. The moment he heard the news, Ning Shu subconsciously looked at Li Hongxiao. After all, Li Hongxiao was the clearest about this matter. Did she say that? Ning Shu couldn't figure it out. Even if Feng Min had curried favor with Elder Sun, what good would it do Li Hongxiao to report it? She knew that Old Master Sun's identity was not simple, but she still risked offending Old Master Sun to do this. Moreover, Feng Min might also bite Li Hongxiao. In terms of interests, Li Hongxiao really didn't have much to gain. Li Hongxiao frowned tightly. Her expression was a little ugly as she muttered, "Why was she so careless?" In the end, she was still discovered. Li Hongxiao was very worried that Feng Min would tell others about the meat delivery. However, only the two of them knew about it now. Feng Min would definitely be the first to suspect her. Li Hongxiao cursed in her heart. The more she thought about it, the more she trembled. She felt that she had suffered an unexpected calamity. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows in surprise. Could it be that Li Hongxiao really didn't report it? Then how could it be? Feng Min happened to be caught. It was simply premeditated and organized. It was so coincidental. Feng Min and Old Master Sun were taken to the wide bar where the production team was drying the grain. They were going to be educated. The two of them were in a very sorry state. Old Master Sun had experienced a lot and was able to remain calm in the face of such a situation. However, Feng Min was different. Although Xinz was an adult, she was born in an era when she was living a good life. She had never encountered such a situation. Now that she was tied up and facing the entire production team, it was as if she was nailed to the rack of shame and had to accept everyone's disdain. This made her view of the world crumble. In the end, it collapsed with a bang. When did it become a crime to even treat someone's illness? She was going to be despised by others. No matter who the other party was, he was just a patient. Old Master Sun was tied up. He straightened his back and said to the team leader, "It has nothing to do with this little girl. It's because I saw that she could use herbs to treat my illness." The pain in my body was unbearable, so I forced her to treat me. Feng Min's eyes stung, and she almost cried. At this moment, everyone in her family wanted nothing to do with her. Because of such treatment, everyone was afraid. It was understandable. Now that old Master Sun was taking all the blame, Feng Min's heart choked up. She scanned the crowd and fixed her gaze on Li Hongxiao. Just as Li Hongxiao had expected, Feng Min believed that Li Hongxiao was the instigator of this matter. Li Hongxiao was so wrong that she wished she could fly in June. Was her brain filled with shit? What good would it do her to push Feng Min out? Li Hongxiao was very afraid now. She was afraid that Feng Min would say something shocking. The production team leader looked at Feng Min. You know how to treat illnesses. He then looked at the Feng family. The Feng family members were also at a loss. When did their child know how to treat illnesses? Feng Min opened her mouth. She was a little unsure if this matter was good or bad for her. Could her knowing how to treat illnesses increase her bargaining chip? After all, medical treatment in this era was lacking. There was a lack of doctors. If there was someone who knew how to treat illnesses, it would undoubtedly be a good thing. However, where did her medical skills come from? It was a big problem. She couldn't possibly say that she knew medical skills out of thin air. Feng Min's mind was spinning. She could say that she had secretly looked at the doctors in the health center and learned some, but it was just blind learning. Feng Min almost swore to the heavens that it was blind. At this moment, Feng Min only wanted to clear her name. She didn't want to drag someone down with her. If she wasn't at the end of her rope, she definitely had to protect herself and not go all out. The onlookers didn't believe her and mocked Old Master Sunday. You're crazy. You actually let a child treat you. Old Master Sun, I have no choice. I'm afraid of the pain. Feng Min was, after all, a member of the production team. If this matter blew up, it wouldn't look good for the entire production team, especially if other people were involved. No one would be able to live in peace. This matter was settled just like that. The Feng family had many work points deducted. As the other party involved, Old Master Sun's treatment was even worse. Li Hongxiao heaved a sigh of relief. However, when she met Feng Min's hateful gaze, she felt terrible. To watch the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3946. Li Hongxiao and Feng Min had become enemies because of this matter. In the future, they would be extremely jealous when they met. Feng Min had a deeper understanding of this era. After she successfully grew up, she had to be careful with her words and actions. Being stared at by Feng Min with hatred, Li Hongxiao's heart turned cold. What would a ghost do to her if she was stared at like this? Ning Shu could clearly feel the collision of luck between the two of them, and it was quickly consumed. Feng Min's luck had a trace of purple. After all, she had gone through thick and thin with Elder Sunday. And Li Hongxiao's luck was suppressed. There was a difference between having a hard core and not having one. In the future, Feng Min would treat people in the production team because of her medical skills, and the situation would become better. There were still a few years before Li Hongxiao could develop. A few years was enough for Feng Min to get rid of Li Hongxiao. The better Feng Min's life was, the worse Li Hongxiao's life would be. Her luck was getting more and more suppressed. Coincidentally, the reason why Feng Min was caught was because the production team had been catching leeches at night recently. These leeches were very large and looked like slugs. These leeches only appeared at night. If one caught enough leeches, they could even earn work points. These leeches were very good medicine. Of course, the villagers collected them and gave them to the production team. They were also collective property. Elder Sun lived not far from the water, so he naturally walked there. Then, he was seen. Even though Feng Min later found out that it was not Li Hongxiao who reported it, her hostility towards Li Hongxiao did not decrease. Li Hongxiao was also angry. It was reasonable for a malicious ghost to occupy someone else's body. Since she had already offended her, she might as well offend her completely. The wisp of consciousness that Ning Shu had placed in the space was about to dissipate, but he still could not open the space. Ning Shu realized that this space could not be underestimated. Did he have to get close to Li Zueyan? Not to mention getting close, Li Zueyan was now a frightened bird. No one could get close to her. She was very vigilant. Even if the space was very hot, she still carried it close to her. Li Zueyan would never give up on the space. Ning Shu wasn't using his consciousness to attack the space. Instead, he was constantly harassing the space, making it think that he was in danger. When Ning Shu went to play with Li Zueji, he was chased away by Li Zueyan. She said that Li Zueji had to work for the family. Not every child was like Ning Shu, who had nothing better to do. Since he couldn't get in touch with Li Zueyan, Ning Shu felt that he had to find another way. This space was really too tough. Li Zueyan carried a big bucket to the waterside to wash clothes. Ning Shu carried a small basket and a sickle and followed behind Li Zueyan. They were cutting the pigweed beside the ditch where the clothes were washed. Because Li Zueyan had something on her mind, she didn't really respond when the young wife and auntie, who were washing clothes, talked to her. She was really annoyed, so she just gave a perfunctory reply. Li Zueyan lowered her head and bent over to wash the clothes. She felt something slip inside the clothes, followed by a thump. A red knitted belt and a white snail fell into the water. Li Zueyan's face turned pale. She quickly touched her neck, but she didn't find the space. Without thinking, she jumped into the pond. Although the weather was hot, the water in the pond was very cold. No one knew how deep it was. Seeing Li Zueyan jump down like a madman and sink, the women washing clothes on the shore panicked and quickly called for someone to save her. Why did she jump down like she was possessed? Li Zueyan didn't know how to swim. She sank and used her hands to fish, but all she touched were some seaweed. She didn't sink to the bottom at all. The space was so small, it was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. Soon, Li Zueyan couldn't breathe. Her lungs were struggling. She opened her mouth and drank a mouthful of water. She struggled to float, but her body didn't listen to her. It was getting heavier and heavier. The fear of death shrouded her heart. Li Zueyan became more and more afraid. At this time, she didn't care about looking for the space. She just wanted to climb up. Ning Shu threw down the sickle and ran to the edge of the pond. He released his spiritual force, went deep into the pond, and lifted Li Zueyan, who was powerless to struggle. Originally, it was a busy time to harvest wheat. Hearing the shouts here, people quickly came over. Hearing that someone fell into the water, some people who could swim jumped down to save her. Li Zueyan was rescued by an educated youth named Lu Yunzhan. Lu Yunzhan dragged Li Zueyan ashore wet. He was wet all over, his thick black hair dripping with water, and his clothes clinging to his body, outlining his strong body. Some young women blushed. Lu Yunzhan, who saved people, never touched Li Zueyan again. At this time, it was a big crime to be a hooligan, although it was to save people. Soon, a lot of people gathered here. Lu Yunzhan pushed the crowd away and left. Li Hongxiao, Zhang Qingqing, and Feng Min looked at Lu Yunzhan's back with flickering eyes. Lu Yunzhan was good-looking. Even if he had a buzz cut, he looked more handsome and burly than other men. In this era where everything was done manually, a burly and powerful figure was quite competitive. But the most important thing now was Li Zueyan. Li Zueyan's family rushed over and beat and cried Li Zueyan, who had just woken up. "What are you doing, you dead girl? Why are you not careful?" A talkative old woman next to her said, "She didn't fall by mistake. She jumped in by herself." Li Zueyan's family cried even more sadly. Li Zueyan's face was pale, and her whole body trembled. The fear of death and the pain of losing her space made Li Tsueyin so anxious that she fainted directly. Li Tsueyin, who was carried home, had a high fever. She was talking in her sleep, saying something about space and so on. Her family was waiting for her to talk nonsense. Ning Shu looked at the pond. It was impossible for the space to fall like this. He had a spiritual connection with Li Tsueyin, so it was not a big problem for her to fall. But Li Tsueyin jumped down to look for the space without thinking. She had probably noticed something. Since the space did not let her enter, she guessed that she might lose her space. Because there was a consciousness around the space, Ning Shu was very clear about its location. Since the space abandoned Li Tsueyin, it was now ownerless. It would quietly wait for the next host, so that it could get rid of Ning Shu's harassment. It felt that it was very dangerous to stay by Li Tsueyin's side, so it had to give up on Li Tsueyin. Ning Shu used his spiritual power to catch the space. Holding the rope, the space shook, wanting to fly out of Ning Shu's control. Li Tsueyin's high fever had not subsided, and it was getting worse. Li Tsueyin's family saw this situation and knew that they had to send her to the hospital quickly. If they delayed any longer, she might die. They borrowed a tractor from the brigade and prepared to take Li Tsueyin to the county for treatment. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3947. Many industries had closed down and were no longer operating. What's the point of operating if you're dead? It was not easy to find these herbs. After the incident, the company was closed down and all the herbs in the warehouse were confiscated. He found someone to test the medicine and controlled the virus. His organs were no longer failing. Zheng Xian turned on his computer and started the live broadcast. When the viewers saw Zheng Xian, they started cursing him. When Zheng Xian took out the special medicine, he said that this medicine could cure diseases. It was developed by his research institute and if anyone wanted it, they could come to the company immediately. Kong Bebe was sweating profusely and her muscles were tight. This had happened in her previous life and she was dreaming about it again. It was torture for her. The netizens were skeptical, but the number of people cursing Zheng Xian suddenly decreased. No one could guarantee that they would not be infected by the virus. If the other party really had the medicine and did not sell it to them, they could only wait for death. More people were doubtful. Zheng Xian directly said that it was up to them to believe it or not. It had nothing to do with him. Her arrogant attitude made it difficult for others to believe her. Soon after, Zheng Xian's phone was bombarded with calls. Everyone knew that Zheng Xian had something in his hands. It could control the virus. Many people rushed to the biopharmaceutical company as fast as they could. Unfortunately, the walls and buildings of the pharmaceutical company were full of filth. When the wind blew, the smell was horrible. It was originally used to disgust Zheng Xian, but now it seemed that they were disgusted. Other than the sun, there was nothing in the world that could not be looked at directly. After a while, the entire building was bustling with people. Zheng Xian stood on the rooftop and looked at the people below. The wind was blowing from above. Some people saw Zheng Xian on the rooftop and looked up at him. There was an uproar. Kong Bebe, who was sleeping, cried. Her muscles were twitching. She struggled as if a ghost was pressing down on her bed. She wanted to stop it, just like when her soul was drifting and watching Zheng Xian die at the prime of his life. Zheng Xian took out the medicine and said proudly, "This is the medicine that can control the virus. Life is so fragile. Just a virus invisible to the naked eye can kill. Now, he can be saved with a few pills." TSK. When Ji Hong heard this, she hurriedly went to the rooftop. When she saw Zheng Xian, who looked like he was about to fly away, she was so scared that her heart went numb. She almost cried and said, "B-boss, Zheng Xian, the special medicine has been developed." "What are you doing?" Zheng Xian shook the medicine bottle in his hand. The pills inside hit the bottle and made a sound. This won't help. So what if they have this medicine? In the future, when people talk about the biopharmaceutical company, it will be a black company that spread the virus. This time, he would definitely not be able to make a comeback. In order to appease the public, he would have to accept the punishment. Then, he would die because of the virus, or he would be suffering now. Ji Hong said, if we give this medicine method, it will definitely be saved. Zheng Xian, don't do anything stupid. Even if this pharmaceutical company is gone, so what? I don't believe that you care about this company so much. Zheng Xian was not a person who would sacrifice his life for money. He saw money as a tool to achieve his dreams. Ji Hong begged, boss, don't leave me. What should I do if you leave me? I said that I wanted to work for you, but now you're leaving me. I don't agree. Zheng Xian looked at his capable subordinate. Warmth flashed in his eyes. You will be fine. I never doubted your tenacity. Why? Then why? Ji Hong was very helpless. She wanted to keep Zheng Xian, but she also knew that with Zheng Xian's character, she would not be able to persuade him. If Kong Bebe was still here, maybe Zheng Xian would still feel that there was something in this world that he would miss. Unfortunately, Kong Bebe was no longer here. Firstly, Kong Bebe's death and departure. Secondly, Zheng Xian had suffered too much malice and abuse from the company. His heart was soaked in ice water, and sometimes it was soaked in boiling hot chilly water. He wanted to leave at this time when everyone was watching him. Zheng Xian said to Ji Hong, I've left all my inheritance to you. Live well. Ji Hong shook her head. I don't want your inheritance. I have hands and feet, and I can earn my own money. I only want you. Don't scare me like this. I'm scared. As she spoke, she slowly moved towards Zheng Xian. Zheng Xian shook his head at her. Don't come over. I want to talk to you properly now. Ji Hong's body stiffened, and she did not dare to move anymore. Below the building, life-saving tools were being set up. Police sirens and horns were blaring. There were more and more people below the building, and it was extremely crowded. The people below all advised Zheng Xian to calm down and not do anything stupid. Zheng Xian looked down at the crowd below with a contemptuous smile. His eyes were full of disdain. He took out a medicine bottle, opened it, and poured it on his hand. These are really effective medicines. Do you want them? The faces of the people below were a little ugly, but no one said they wanted it. There were even people who used loudspeakers to insult Zheng Xian upstairs. They really couldn't stand him being so arrogant. He was the one who was in the wrong. He still did not know that he was in the wrong. He should change his attitude and ask for everyone's forgiveness. They had never seen such an arrogant entrepreneur. What good would it do him to offend the consumers? Reality would teach him a lesson. Zheng Xian turned to Ji Hong and said, leave. Don't get caught to make medicine. Even if I want to help them make medicine, now is not the time. Ji Hong shook her head with red eyes. She suddenly smiled and said, Zheng Xian, let's go together. No, this is the last time I order you to leave. You're fired. After saying that, Zheng Xian ignored Ji Hong. He poured out all the pills in the bottle and crushed them one by one in front of the people below. The ingredients are not easy to find this time, and it's a new discovery. I destroyed this thing. Let me think, it's probably 20 or 30 years before the discovery of this medicine. 20 or 30 years. I don't know if that's enough time for people to die, Zheng Xian said as he crushed the pills. Piece by piece, the white powder disappeared as the wind blew. Everyone looked at each other. They did not know if Zheng Xian was telling the truth or not. If it was true, then they had crushed something that many people were waiting for to save their lives. He dared to crush it like that. Was he crazy? Someone stopped Sing Xian. Don't crush it. We can talk about it. You can ask for as much money as you want. Sing Xian snorted and said with disdain, what do you mean I don't want? I just like to see you guys struggle. It's so nice to see you guys struggle together. He was a pervert. The pills in the bottle were getting fewer and fewer. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. Chapter 39-48. If these pills were real, and they could really suppress and kill the virus, then these pills would be equivalent to human lives being lost. What kind of people were they? They created this virus and wreaked havoc in the world. They didn't even know that they were in the wrong. Now that they had developed a special medicine, they wanted to destroy it. This kind of people should forever be nailed to the cross of shame. They should be despised by everyone and blamed by future generations. Sing Xian knew what these people were thinking. He just sneered. This virus would definitely appear. It was just that it would appear in his hands. Whether it was in ancient times or now, humans had always been suffering from the torture of diseases. Medicine had its limitations. It had been a long time since the development of herbal medicine to modern Western medicine. For example, the famous penicillin. If it wasn't for the discovery of this special medicine by a biopharmaceutical company, the discovery of this special medicine would have been delayed. It would definitely be discovered, but not now. The crowd below started to get restless. Everyone was trying to persuade Sing Xian to calm down. Life was precious and he shouldn't joke around with his life. There was no hurdle that couldn't be overcome. Ji Hong smiled at Sing Xian, but she was crying. Look, they've forgiven you. You've already atoned for your sins by discovering the special medicine. Sing Xian sneered. Who needs their forgiveness? What did I do wrong? I didn't commit any crimes. I don't need their forgiveness. They are just lowly rats who are struggling at death's door and possess the most vicious thoughts. I feel insulted when I think of using my medicine on them. Sing Xian's eyes were filled with disdain. The crowd below were all rats. Other than wasting resources, they were useless. They were waiting for someone to save them. Once something happened, they would immediately reveal their ugly faces. It made people want to vomit. Ji Hong was speechless. Although she knew that Sing Xian was cold and didn't have any empathy or sympathy for others, she didn't expect others to be so unbearable and ugly in his heart. Yes, that's right. But you can't die for a group of rats, right? It's not worth it at all. Who would care about what rats say, right? Ji Hong followed Sing Xian's logic. He hoped that Sing Xian would not be impulsive. Sing Xian shook his head. I don't want to be judged by a group of rats. There are so many rats accompanying me, and they have been tortured. Tell me, how does it feel to have hope and then have it shattered? Ji Hong was speechless. She was anxious to death, but she did not know what to do. How could she make Sing Xian give up such a dangerous idea? She liked him and didn't want him to die. Ji Hong shouted at him, don't you want to know how Kong Beibei died? Don't you want to know who killed Kong Beibei? Sing Xian's face stiffened. As for the man who coaxed Kong Beibei, he had already gone to hell. That rat couldn't take the threat and confessed everything. He had taken a fancy to Kong Beibei's loneliness and took advantage of it. He had used sweet words to take Kong Beibei away. He had also taken a fancy to Kong Beibei's money. After causing Kong Beibei's death, he had taken away all of Kong Beibei's belongings. Could there be a mastermind behind Kong Beibei's death? Why didn't that man say anything? His tone was filled with greed for Kong Beibei. There was no mastermind. Ji Hong said with red eyes, you're wrong. It's not like that. I caused Kong Beibei's death. I was jealous of her. I was jealous that she didn't cherish you when she had you and made you sad. She had nothing to do. Other than making you sad, she didn't do anything. She kept making you sad, but you indulged her. What's so good about her? Ji Hong's voice was extremely hoarse. Her tone was filled with jealousy and sadness. Clearly, these were her heartfelt words. What's so good about her? She relied on you but was so fierce to you. When she was outside, she was so timid and needed you to protect her. If you didn't protect her, she might have caused trouble again. She would have been bullied again. If she had been as ruthless to you, she wouldn't have been bullied and cheated. She deserved to die. In the end, Ji Hong's tone was filled with disgust. She detested Kong Beibei. Zheng Xian had always been calm in the face of death and in the face of a group of people. But now, his face was stiff and his pupils were trembling. His lips moved. It's really you? Ji Hong nodded. Yes, it's me. I can see that your wife is someone else. I can see that you're happy. I just can't stand her trampling on you like this. Come here. Come here and kill me to avenge Kong Beibei. I killed your wife. Zheng Xian narrowed his eyes. He calmed down a little. It's not you. It won't be you. It's me. I was the one who found that man to get in touch with Kong Beibei. According to Kong Beibei's stupidity, she's so innocent and naive. She'll believe whatever others say. She won't believe anything you say. It's too easy to fool her. Ji Hong sneered. I don't regret it at all. I just didn't expect you to be so sad. What's so good about her? Ji Hong questioned Zheng Xian like a jealous woman. She's just so stupid and annoying. Do you know how happy I was when I found out that she was dead? But I had to suppress the ecstasy in my heart to comfort you. The more Ji Hong spoke, the more she went overboard. Her vicious face was unbearable to look at. It was too ugly. Zheng Xian was silent for a moment. It's not you. Ji Hong smiled. Should I thank you for trusting me, or should I say that you're stupid and underestimate a woman's jealousy? Come and avenge Kong Beibei. Even if you don't, come and drag me down with you. Ji Hong's face was full of provocation. If I didn't say it, you probably wouldn't even know who killed Kong Beibei. You're so stupid. Oh, my stupid friend. Zheng Xian understood that Ji Hong was trying to provoke him and make him go over. If that was really the case, she didn't say it in the past because she wanted to keep it a secret. Zheng Xian looked at Ji Hong. Are you serious? Of course I'm serious. But I didn't expect that you'd rather die. You'd rather die with Kong Beibei than live. Ji Hong gritted her teeth. If I had known, I would have let that woman live. I would have let you see her true colors. The true colors of a selfish woman. The living couldn't win against the dead. Because the dead were constantly beautified in the hearts of people with intentions, their shortcomings were almost forgotten. But the living kept coming into contact with the dead, and those shortcomings were constantly magnified. Zheng Xian frowned. I'll ask you one last time. Was it you? Chapter 39-49. Even if these people knew that Feng Min's situation was a little strange, they would still choose to believe Feng Min because it was beneficial to them. What was the benefit of going against Feng Min with Li Hongxiao? Ning Shu hoped that Li Hongxiao would stop going against Feng Min. Her luck would be suppressed more and more, and this would make Li Hongxiao in existence like a supporting female character. She was destined to be trampled under Feng Min's feet. There was no grudge between the two of them. However, if Li Hongxiao continued to provoke Feng Min, it would be easy for something to happen. However, if she held back her anger and insisted on going against Feng Min, then the local reincarnated girl would become a supporting female character. Li Hongxiao's reincarnation was already very lucky, but if she did not cherish it, it would be a pity. Ning Shu cherished his reincarnated life more, and his life was very comfortable. Even a weak body was not enough to make her worry all the time. Li Hongxiao could develop silently on her own, and there was no benefit in exposing Feng Min. Ning Shu said to Li Hongxiao, "Sister, why don't you like Feng Min?" "I think many people like Feng Min because Feng Min can treat everyone." Li Hongxiao felt stifled, the people around her were traitors. "You like her too?" "I don't know," Ning Shu said, "you don't like Feng Min, but there are many people who like Feng Min. You can't win against them." This was the most stifled part of Li Hongxiao's heart. She had bewitched too many people, and relied on her strange medical skills to treat people. These people were not afraid of dying from the treatment. Feng Min did not even study much, and she could not recognize all the words. Suddenly, she could treat people and even talk about some herbal knowledge. She was a fucking literary star. Li Hongxiao was so angry that her heart hurt. She wanted to see how long Feng Min could last. She liked to win people's hearts, and see what she could win. Later on, people were not satisfied. Let's see if she could satisfy other people's requests in the future, hee. Now, Feng Min was treating patients for free, and she was doing her best. She treated the medical center as a decoration. It was fine for a short period of time, but in the long term, would the medical center not have any opinions? Moreover, it was free. When Feng Min wanted to collect money in the future, who knew what kind of expression the production team would have? It was free in the past, but now she was charging them. She did not consider that Feng Min did not have the obligation to treat these people for free. But habits are hard to change. If he gave the egg to someone who didn't like to eat eggs and suddenly stopped giving it to them one day, it would definitely cause resentment. However, he didn't think that this egg originally belonged to someone who didn't like to eat eggs. He had the final say on how to distribute the eggs, but the people who were used to eating eggs would be very angry. "If you give me one thing, I will give you one thing, but if you give me another, I will hate you." Although these villagers were grateful to Feng Min for treating them for free, in the future, these villagers would have a different attitude towards her. Although it was not to the extent that everyone was unreasonable, there would always be people who would whisper and say that Feng Min was a hypocrite. These whispers made Feng Min feel as uncomfortable as if she had swallowed a fly. Ha 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 ha! Li Hongxiao laughed out loud. She couldn't wait to see that scene. Ning Shu saw that Li Hongxiao was suddenly relaxed again. She was cutting the pigweed much faster. She let out a carefree laugh even though they were separated by a distance. He didn't know what she was thinking. It was better for Li Hongxiao to develop slowly on her own. Even if she really went against Feng Min in the future, she would have a foundation to establish herself. For people like Li Hongxiao and Feng Min, one had been reborn, so there was nothing they could do. For people like Feng Min, who had medical skills, there was nothing they could do. They could only leave things as they were. For people like Li Tsueyan, who had a space, she could let things return to how they were. There was also Zhang Qingqing's carp life. To be honest, this was the first time Ning Shu had seen someone with such a life providence. However, Zhang Qingqing's life providence was that of an ordinary person. Where did her luck come from? What kind of good thing would automatically jump into someone's lap? It was so fantastical. It was really enviable. For ordinary people to obtain what they wanted, the hard work and sweat they had to put in was unimaginable. If a carp life really existed, they must have saved the world in their previous life to have such a life providence. After cutting the pigweed, Li Hongxiao carried a huge basket of pigweed on her back. Feng Min was talking to a woman. Li Hongxiao said to Feng Min with a grin, "You are the best. You are the best. You really have a bodhisattva's heart. You treated us for free. Thank you. You are too kind." The woman beside her nodded as well. "That's right. Feng Min is a good person." Feng Min looked at Li Hongxiao in bafflement. What trouble was she up to now? Continue working hard. I have high hopes for you. Li Hongxiao extended a thumb and gave Feng Min a big thumbs up. She was all smiles and looked extremely sincere. Feng Min was filled with suspicions. Thank you. As long as you don't come looking for trouble with me. There's no need to thank me. Li Hongxiao waved her hand and said, I might come looking for you to treat me in the future. Ning Shu was left speechless. Li Hongxiao was flattering Feng Min. She was putting Feng Min on a pedestal. If Feng Min were to quit one day, no matter how nice these words sounded, it would be ironic when the time came. However, Ning Shu was still relieved that Li Hongxiao wasn't at loggerheads with Feng Min. There was no lack of people with good lives in this world, but with too many of them gathered together, it was easy for problems to arise. After resolving the problem of Li Tsui in space, the next step was to explore Zhang Qingqing's carp life. Zhang Qingqing almost treated the mountain forest as her backyard. The mountain forest that was very dangerous to others was a source of food for Zhang Qingqing. She caught some rabbits and pheasants, and some mountain delicacies could also add some nutrition to her bland meals. Moreover, there were some wild fruits on the mountain that could be eaten. She also picked up some wild eggs, and even some unknown eggs. Zhang Qingqing often took the children of the Zhang family into the mountain and would always find some good things to secretly bring home. Ning Shu carried a small basket and followed them into the mountain. He didn't ask Zhang Qingqing to take him. Zhang Qingqing was more repulsive to others. Even if they found good things, they still had to share them. Ning Shu wandered around and didn't find anything delicious. The mushrooms he found were still bright and poisonous at first glance. He didn't use his spiritual force to search. He just wandered around like this. Ning Shu's basket was clean. Ning Shu was left speechless. His luck was really bad. The humble lemon spirit could only be sour. So this carp life was really too lucky. Ning Shu used his spiritual force to keep up with Zhang Qingqing and the others. Zhang Qingqing took the lead. Her burden was very heavy and she went deep into the forest. The Zhang family behind her was more convinced by Zhang Qingqing and followed her footsteps. At this time, the forest was still very dangerous. Not to mention wild boars, it was said that there were also wolves and bears. If they encountered them, these children were really not enough to fight. Ning Shu kept up with the team in front of him. In order to avoid being discovered, he still kept a distance. To watch the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile phone address. Chapter 3950. He carefully studied Zhang Qingqing's koi life. Speaking of which, Ning Shu could wander around aimlessly because she wasn't from this world. When she was outside and didn't return home, her nominal parents didn't seem to remember that they had such a daughter. When they saw Ning Shu, they seemed to realize that this was their daughter. Therefore, even if Ning Shu ran around and disappeared one day, she would naturally disappear from these people's memories. From nothing to something, and then from something to nothing. The world wouldn't leave her mark, and the world would erase her existence. She didn't belong to this world to begin with. Ning Shu's attention was on the group in front of him. The red rope tied to his wrist suddenly fell off and disappeared into the grass. Ning Shu touched his wrist and smiled. The space had escaped. It could escape as it wished. Don't forget that it still had a consciousness. It was as though the space wanted to choose a new host. It appeared on the path that Zhang Qingqing had to pass. Ning Shu felt that the space had some ideas. At the very least, it had good foresight. It chose Zhang Qingqing. A space that could do whatever it wanted, and an extremely lucky life providence. If the two were to be combined, it would definitely be the rhythm of heaven. Ning Shu ran quickly with the small basket on his back and circled in front of Zhang Qingqing. Before Zhang Qingqing could discover the striking red rope, Ning Shu stepped on the space. The space was boiling hot, as though it was about to burn Ning Shu's feet. Ning Shu's sudden appearance gave the Zhang family's children a fright. They subconsciously asked, "Who is she?" This was because there didn't seem to be such a child in their memories. Zhang Qingqing stared at Ning Shu. You are Li Hongxiao's sister, right?" Her tone was somewhat uncertain. After all, this was the only memory in her mind. Ning Shu nodded and said, "Yes, I'm lost now. I can't find my way back." Zhang Qingqing was puzzled. Your family would be at ease if you came out alone. Furthermore, he could run so far. Ning Shu squatted down and dug out the space under his feet. He held it tightly in his hand and said, "I don't know. I don't know how far I walked." The children of the Zhang family all looked at Zhang Qingqing, waiting to see if Zhang Qingqing would bring this little radish head along. Zhang Qingqing had gone deep into the forest today because she wanted to harvest more. In the end, she met an outsider. Naturally, she could not continue. Zhang Qingqing had some feelings about her special physique. For example, her luck was especially good. However, this was definitely not something that could be exposed. If she saw it and the child casually talked about it, they would be in trouble. Zhang Qingqing glanced at Ning Shu and said to the brothers and sisters, "You want to send her back?" Ning Shu, "Thank you, sister." "Thank you." A group of people escorted Ning Shu out. During this time, there were rabbits jumping around and pheasants clucking, but Zhang Qingqing ignored them. However, Ning Shu said, "There are rabbits and pheasants. There's meat to eat." Zhang Qingqing said, "You can't catch it." As soon as she finished speaking, a pheasant flapped its wings and flew to her feet. These creatures were also drunk. In any case, they had a life as well. Why did they deliver themselves to the door to be eaten? Even ants would drag out their lives to live. Ning Shu asked cautiously, "Can we catch it now?" At the same time, he carefully observed Zhang Qingqing. Was there something on Zhang Qingqing that made these creatures throw themselves at her one after another, even risking their lives? Even if the pheasant's brain was only the size of a sesame seed, it should know that it would not benefit from being caught. Its survival instinct would make it struggle to survive. Or was there a parasite in its body? If the parasite wanted to spread, it would make the host more eye-catching and make the host behave more strangely. In this way, the parasite could infect other creatures through the food chain. At the mention of parasites, Ning Shu's appetite for the pheasant quickly decreased. Ning Shu rubbed his eyes and felt that his eyes were ordinary. He really did not find anything unusual about Zhang Qingqing. Everyone looked at the fluttering pheasant, but no one reached out to catch it. Ning Shu blinked and reached out to catch the pheasant, but the pheasant ran away and disappeared in a flash. A straightforward person in the Zhang family sneered. Did he think he was Zhang Qingqing, who could be caught at will? Qingqing was a fairy in heaven. She was so lucky. She hadn't been caught yet, and you wanted to catch it? What a dream. Ning Shu said, "Sure enough, I can't catch it." However, the pheasant is not afraid of people at all. It dares to fly over. Everyone ignored Ning Shu. Along the way, there were many rabbits and pheasants bumping into them. They also encountered some sour fruits. Although they were not very sweet, they were still a kind of snack for children. Although there were rabbits and pheasants flying over, Zhang Qingqing did not reach out to catch them. The Zhang family stood still when they saw the meat. It was mainly because of Ning Shu, an outsider. Ning Shu used her spiritual power to scan Zhang Qingqing inch by inch like an X-ray. She wanted to know what was on her body that made these animals rush to her without fear of death. The space in his palm was boiling hot. This space could not wait to fly into Zhang Qingqing's hand. It was normal to be lucky. Some people could turn misfortunes into blessings. It was as if the heavens were helping them. However, to let these animals fly to their deaths like this was simply showing off. Could it be that there was a trap in Zhang Qingqing's body? Like a moth flying into a flame, using light to trap insects. To solve this problem, Ning Shu felt that he might have to become an animal to know what Zhang Qingqing looked like in the eyes of animals. Ning Shu thought for a moment and used a wisp of consciousness to invade the mind of a rabbit and look at Zhang Qingqing with the rabbit's eyes. In the end, Ning Shu was stunned. This was because in the rabbit's eyes, Zhang Qingqing was a fruit that emitted spiritual energy. She was a huge peach. Since it was such a good thing, it would definitely pounce on it and take a bite. However, this peach was surrounded by a kind of astral wind. Could it be that Zhang Qingqing was really a fairy? At the very least, she was a peach fairy. Ning Shu retracted his consciousness and looked at Zhang Qingqing again. She was completely an ordinary person. There was no spiritual energy or astral wind around her. Whose eyes have been deceived? Whose brain has been deceived? Zhang Qingqing must have had some fortuitous encounter to create such a strange physique. Ning Shu was inclined to believe that this physique was targeted at animals. If it was a human, he had not seen anyone run in front of Zhang Qingqing and kill themselves. This situation was not easy to resolve. With the passage of time, it could be said that Zhang Qingqing's physique was of little use. With society developing, people didn't need to go deep into the mountains to hunt. A life like hers was useless. However, it wasn't completely useless. When she went to the river to fish, she could catch more than others. After carefully looking at Zhang Qingqing's life providence, it was indeed an ordinary life providence. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3951. Could she not care about Zhang Qingqing? If Zhang Qingqing opened a farm in the future, the chickens and ducks would all go into suicide mode the moment Zhang Qingqing appeared. Zhang Qingqing's advantage would become a disadvantage. If this kind of koi life only targeted birds and beasts, what if it evolved to target humans? The so-called koi life meant that if one was on good terms with Zhang Qingqing, there would be benefits. If one was on bad terms with Zhang Qingqing, they would automatically be unlucky. Ning Shu only had this thought in her mind. She lost her footing and twisted her ankle. The pain was like being pricked by needles. She would not die in front of Zhang Qingqing, but it was true that she would be unlucky. Especially those who had ill intentions towards Zhang Qingqing. They would definitely be unlucky. She wanted to get rid of Zhang Qingqing's koi life, so it was normal for her to be unlucky. She clearly did not have a life of great wealth. If she did, she would not have been born in such a poor mountain village. Or maybe Zhang Qingqing's parents were someone else. In fact, Zhang Qingqing had been lost when she was young. Or maybe she had been abducted by human traffickers and sold here. To be honest, at this time, girls could not be raised. Some people would just throw them away, not to mention spend money to buy a girl. Although she sprained her ankle, Ning Shu snorted and continued walking. As she walked, she sprained her other foot as well. Then, both her feet were crippled. She swayed like a duck when she walked. It was painful. Zhang Qingqing looked at Ning Shu and asked, "What's wrong with you? Was there something wrong with him?" Ning Shu smiled while trembling. "I'm fine. Nothing happened. It's just a pity for those pheasants and rabbits." Zhang Qingqing said indifferently, "You will be able to catch them when you grow up. If you really want to eat meat, get your family to go to the supply and demand cooperative to get some meat." Ning Shu grunted. She saw rustling in the grass. There were definitely rabbits inside. There was a strange feeling that these rabbits were like wooden stakes waiting for rabbits to show up. When they were waiting for her, she would crash into them. The space in her palm almost turned into magma. It burned through Ning Shu's hand, but she still held the space expressionlessly and refused to let go. It was probably because the space was too precious to Zhang Qingqing, and Zhang Qingqing's physique could perfectly provide shelter for the space. After sending Ning Shu back to the Li family, Zhang Qingqing handed Ning Shu over to his nominal parents and informed Ning Shu's parents that she had run off into the woods alone. When Ning Shu's mother saw Ning Shu, she was stunned for a moment. Then, she seemed to realize that it was her daughter and immediately picked up a broom to hit her. "What are you doing in there alone? There are wolves inside. Let's see if they won't bite you." Seeing that Ning Shu was small, he didn't kill him. Then he thanked Zhang Qingqing. Otherwise, he didn't know when he would be able to find her. Zhang Qingqing waved her hand and left with her brothers and sisters. Ning Shu sat down and rubbed his ankle. It was swollen, and he probably wouldn't be able to walk normally for many days. His mother scolded and went into the house to find some medicinal wine for Ning Shu. Then she rubbed Ning Shu's ankle. Ning Shu was in so much pain that he cried like a ghost and howled like a wolf. After Zhang Qingqing left, the temperature of the space in the palm of his hand gradually dropped. It was probably because his heart was dead like ashes. Ning Shu opened his hand. His palm was covered with a string of blisters. Even his skin was rotten. The snail stuck to his skin and flesh, and it was very painful when he pulled it. He was really unlucky to meet Zhang Qingqing. Ning Shu picked up a stone and rhythmically smashed it on the space. Although he couldn't break it, he still wanted to let the space know his feelings. Ning Shu smashed the stone, but the space was stable and motionless. Anyway, Ning Shu wasn't in a hurry. There were plenty of opportunities to deal with the space. The space was now a coward. When he left this world, he wouldn't even have the chance to be a coward. Ning Shu wouldn't keep this world by his side. If he left this world and really obtained the heavenly Tao's power of faith, it could improve his physique. He had to frequently enter the world, and then this world would follow him into the world and absorb the spiritual energy and laws of the world. It was so beautiful. The wound on his hand attracted his mother's roar. She took a needle and broke it one by one. Then she applied some medicine that he couldn't tell what it was. Ning Shu wanted to say that it was easier to get infected if it was broken, but children didn't have the right to speak. While she was busy, she said, "How could I have such a lively child like you?" As she spoke, her face was a little blank. Obviously, she fell into the doubts that she had this child. It was Ning Shu who called out to her, bringing her back to reality. Ning Shu felt that this heavenly Tao was a little perfunctory. In the future, if he met someone with a higher IQ and more confidence in himself, he was afraid that they wouldn't believe Ning Shu's fake identity at all. "How did you get this injury? Did you grab the fire tongs or the fire stick?" his mother asked. "Ning Shu, that's it." His mother glanced at Ning Shu. Could it be that he was a fool? Because his hands and feet were injured, Ning Shu was kept at home by his nominal parents and couldn't go out. Because he was careless and met Zhang Qingqing this time, he wasn't prepared. Ning Shu felt that he should be more prepared. Whoever met him would be unlucky. This physique was simply untouchable. It was fine. Ning Shu used a needle to poke the snail every day. He would catch a point and grind it desperately. There would be a day when he would grind it through. Although he couldn't use the spatial laws, he could at least feel the location of the spatial node. He would do it at that location. The blisters on his hand were suppurating. It was a little painful. He could obviously pull out life, but why was he scalded like this by a little temperature? It was very pitiful. The space felt the danger and closed itself even more tightly. It didn't dare to poke its head out and shrank back. It was rare to have such a thick spatial wall. Some plain spatial walls weren't even this thick. The space didn't dare to cause trouble anymore. It didn't heat up or make any movements. It was just an ordinary decoration. Even when it saw Zhang Qingqing, it didn't move. Ning Shu also didn't get angry when he saw Zhang Qingqing. Because once he touched her, it would rebound. It was quite troublesome to deal with. So he didn't care about Zhang Qingqing for the time being. He didn't want to add new injuries to his old injuries. Zhang Qingqing brought the little naughty monkey at home to catch birds in the trees and fish in the river. They always had a lot to gain. Ning Shu didn't want to deal with Zhang Qingqing. In fact, the biggest threat was this space. It was a parasite. The parasite was dealt with. He could leave the world, but he still couldn't. Ning Shu looked up at the sky. At this moment, the heavenly Tao was probably looking at him ruthlessly. He felt like he couldn't leave if he couldn't do it. If he didn't leave, it meant that the matter wasn't resolved. In this world, there were two timelines that intersected. One was rebirth, and the other was transmigration. The two parallel lines suddenly intersected to a point, and this point was now. There was probably a problem with the time in this world. It was forcefully reversed. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3952. Ning Shu was forced to stay at home. During this time, another batch of educated youths came to the production team. The leader of the production team was so worried that his hair fell out. Why did these children come again? She had no choice but to arrange for these educated youths. Ning Shu eagerly followed them to join in the fun. He repeatedly promised his mother that he would not run into the mountains again and followed behind Li Hongxiao. Because she was entrusted by the heavenly Tao, Ning Shu did not know the development of the plot. So no matter what happened in the village, she had to know. Li Hongxiao saw a man in the group of educated youths. His eyes were red and his whole body was trembling. His eyes were full of hatred. This was the man. After marrying her, he could take the college entrance examination and return to the city. He said that he would work hard to create good conditions to take the college entrance examination. Well, she believed his nonsense and looked for materials everywhere. She did not do any work and just reviewed at home, eating and drinking well. She was afraid that he would be tired, so she took all the work at home. He was admitted. She wanted to go with him, but it was not convenient to go to school. She believed his nonsense again and sent him living expenses every month. In the end, he found a classmate and married her. When she asked him, he said that he had always been grateful to her and had always treated her as his sister. What a pervert. He actually slept on the same bed as his sister and did that kind of thing with her. In the village, a banquet was considered a marriage. Especially for educated youths, some of their identity documents were not in front of them. A few tables of banquets, witnessed by relatives and friends, were considered a marriage and became husband and wife. It was because there was no legal guarantee that this guy took advantage of the loophole. But she could not stand this guy's virtue of taking advantage of her. Li Hongxiao looked at Zhang Desong with a gloomy expression. Zhang Desong felt that someone was looking at him. He turned and smiled at Li Hongxiao, revealing his white teeth. He looked like a sunny and cheerful young man. Li Hongxiao asked coldly, "What are you smiling at? You are so casual when you are so serious. You did not take our leader's words to heart. You are not thinking straight." As soon as they met, Li Hongxiao put a big hat on Zhang Desong. The smile on Zhang Desong's face froze and his face turned red. He was very confused about how he had provoked such a cold person. Zhang Desong's uneasy and puzzled look attracted the sympathy of the woman next to him. He didn't do anything. You're such a girl. Hee, do you agree with his improper behavior? That's not what I meant. Why are you biting whoever you catch? The woman's expression changed. I've never seen someone as petty as you. He didn't really do anything wrong. Why don't you just turn a blind eye to it? Li Hongxiao rolled her eyes. That's right, she would bite whoever she caught. She said that she was going overboard and would turn a blind eye to it. It's not like you were deceived by Zhang Desong. Regardless of whether it was his past life or this life, she just wanted to take revenge on Zhang Desong. Did he have to pick a time to take revenge? Was he not Zhang Desong in this lifetime? The hurt she had suffered was real. Forgive your sister, what does it have to do with you? Auntie, do you mean that we can deal with things like thoughts at will? Li Hongxiao asked the talkative woman. The woman was so shocked that she waved her hands and hurriedly distanced herself from Li Hongxiao. Once she was involved in this kind of thing, it meant endless trouble. Zhang Desong didn't expect that he would be forced to endure such a storm of false accusations just because he had smiled. Just because he smiled a little, he had improper thoughts. Was there really nothing wrong with this girl's brain? However, Zhang Desong, who had just arrived, chose to endure it. He would find an opportunity when he was more familiar with this place. She was just a little girl, and a mushroom from a small village. He didn't care about her at all. On the way back, Ning Shu was held by Li Hongxiao. He held her scalded hand. It really hurt. Li Hongxiao's attention was all on Zhang Desong. It was obvious that the two of them had a grudge in their past lives. Every reincarnated girl had a tragic story in her past life. After being reborn, it was natural for her to take revenge on the scum of her past life. It could be considered a characteristic tragedy of this era. Ning Shu was too lazy to care about what grudges the two of them had. As long as these four mushrooms didn't collide with each other, it was fine. Ning Shu's hand hurt. His brain exploded. He thought that maybe it was because Zhang Qingqing had contributed to this plane that she was bestowed with such a physique. Just like how she once had such an experience that made people jealous. Heavenly materials and earthly treasures drilled into her bosom. If that was the case, Zhang Qingqing was a person protected by the world. There really wasn't a good ending for anyone who went against her. So was Zhang Qingqing the world's benefactor or not? Ning Shu looked up at the sky and gave the middle finger in his heart. In any case, finish the plot. How long would it take to guess like this? With enough information, he could cut the Gordian knot. Many of the newly arrived educated youths were somewhat unable to bear the heavy farm work. They faced the yellow soil with their backs to the sky. Zhang Desong was a city dweller through and through. Although his family's conditions were poor, living in a tube-shaped apartment, a dilapidated house, and a noisy and crowded environment. When had he ever done such heavy work? On the first day, Zhang Desong was paralyzed with exhaustion. On the second day, he couldn't get up at all. It was impossible to ask for help. The other people's work hadn't been finished. Only then did Zhang Desong feel that going to the countryside was really not that simple. On the first day, he had the intention to retreat. Li Hongxiao stood outside the door and shouted, "Is there anyone who hasn't gotten up yet?" Zhang Desong said in the room, "I'll be right there." Li Hongxiao ran to the leader and directly complained, "Zhang Desong is still in bed and hasn't gotten up. The others have already harvested a row of wheat, but he still got up. This is slack thinking." Zhang Desong, who had endured the soreness all over his body, ran over hurriedly. When he heard Li Hongxiao's words, his face darkened. He hurriedly explained, "It's not that I don't want to work. I just got up a little late." A little late. The other educated youths all got up. You're the only special one. Why don't you be the young master of a capitalist? Zhang Desong's face turned pale. I'm a civilian through and through. Don't accuse me so casually. The leader of the production team was not in the mood to watch the two people arguing. He shouted to Zhang Desong, "Why are you still in a daze? Why don't you get down to the field?" Zhang Desong hurriedly went to work. Under the hot sun, it was simply better to die. His eyes were dazzled, and his whole person was not good. When he got off work, he stopped Li Hongxiao who was carrying the pigweed. "What did I do to offend you? Why are you so against me?" "Against you? You think too much. I'm like this to everyone. When you do something wrong, you say that others are against you. So what if I'm against you? I'm against you. If I don't take revenge, it's a pity that I'm reborn. It's still early." Chapter 3953. Zheng Xian was now a little afraid of calling his parents. He was not afraid that his parents would beat him, but he was afraid that his parents would beat his teachers. If it happened again, Zheng Xian felt that the school would no longer tolerate him. As for the students who had a conflict with him before, they were probably reprimanded by their parents when they went home. When they saw him, their faces were full of resentment and disgust. But they did not rush up to do anything. To Zheng Xian, this kind of level was like an itch. He did not care about it at all. Zheng Xian was the kind of person who lived in his own world. He was not so sentimental and did not have the fear of being hated by others. It was good that they did not come to find trouble with him. Fear did not exist. On the contrary, Zheng Xian was a little afraid of Ning Shu. Once she encountered something, her mouth would not stop. It was as if there were countless sharp arrows piercing his face. It was very uncomfortable. Zheng Xian began to collect information about Kong Beibei. He learned about Kong Beibei's family, including family members, home address, and her parents' profession. According to the information obtained, this was a well-respected, glamorous family. They were rich and powerful. They were the upper class of the city. And he was just a low-class person. Zheng Xian clicked his tongue. In the future, he would be able to climb up to such a rich family. How did he do it? He even let their daughter marry him. Interesting. During the weekend, Zheng Xian rented a broken motorcycle, got a chamade hairstyle, and got a one-time tattoo on his neck. He looked like a gangster. Then he rode the rented broken motorcycle to a high-class villa. However, Zheng Xian also knew to avoid the traffic police on the road. He went to a more remote place. It happened to be Sunday. Maybe Kong Beibei's parents were at home. Since it was a high-class villa area, of course, the security was quite good. When Zheng Xian rode the broken motorcycle and wanted to go in, he was stopped by the security. "What are you doing?" The people who lived here were either rich or respectable. This guy who looked like a gangster came to this place. What was wrong with him? Zheng Xian said casually, "I'm here to look for my girlfriend." "Get out of the way." The security guard's expression was extremely complicated. With his poor appearance, how could he find a rich family's daughter? What kind of daydream was this? Zheng Xian said arrogantly, "My girlfriend's surname is Kong, and her father is Kong Sai. Let me in, or else you'll lose your jobs." The security guard's heart was in a mess. There was indeed someone like Kong Sai, but he was the CEO of a big company. This guy didn't even have a draft for bragging, saying that he was the boyfriend of his daughter. Had the rich girl's eyes been blinded by shit? Zheng Xian was originally very gloomy. Now that he had such a wretched look on his face, it was simply unbearable. "Don't look at me like this. The rich girl has a discerning eye and knows my strengths. Don't think that I don't know that you guys are looking down on me." The security guards were speechless. "You still have a pretty good idea in your heart. Let's not talk about who I am first. You should inform the Kong family and confirm whether it's true or not. If I'm lying to you, you can just kick me out. If it's true, then it's your mistake at work," Zheng Xian said to the security guard. Then, the security guard was convinced by Zheng Xian. He thought that it was just a matter of making a phone call. What if there really was a rich girl who was blind? Girls, once they fell in love, there was no way to reason with them. So he made a phone call. The housekeeper in the villa answered the phone, and then he went to Kong Beibei's room. "There's someone outside looking for you. It's a boy. He said his name is Zheng Xian." Kong Beibei's eyes lit up. She thought that Zheng Xian would never look for her again. Kong Beibei immediately looked in the mirror to see if her clothes were messy. Then she patted her face to make her complexion look better. The housekeeper looked at Kong Beibei speechlessly. Kong Beibei walked out of the room and bumped into Kong Beibei's mother. She asked, "Where are you going?" "There's a friend outside looking for me. I'll be back soon," Kong Bebe said. The housekeeper hesitated for a moment. She couldn't help but say to the hostess, "Miss has been very strange recently. And the person who came to look for her is a boy." Kong Bebe's mother immediately frowned. Her well-maintained face flashed with disapproval. Her well-behaved daughter was fooling around with a boy behind her family's back. How could her precious daughter be entangled with a strange boy? She had to ensure that her daughter was pure and clean. Not just anyone could get close to her. In the future, it would be a stain in her daughter's life. Kong Bebe's mother immediately followed her out. Kong Bebe walked quickly in front of the door. When she saw Xing Xian, she didn't dare to recognize him at first. Xing Xian was really a pervert. It hurt people's eyes to look at him. Kong Bebe walked over and asked, "Why are you looking for me?" Xing Xian looked at the woman behind him. It was a rich lady. She looked over and met Xing Xian's eyes. She looked away and walked to the side. Xing Xian saw her gloomy face and smirked. Xing Xian said, "Nothing. I just wanted to have some fun with you. Do you want to go out and have some fun?" Kong Bebe looked at his frivolous face. "Did water get into your brain? It was too abnormal." Xing Xian shrugged. "I was muddle-headed before. It's my honor that a rich lady like you likes me." Kong Bebe felt a sense of disgust. When Xing Xian didn't accept her, she was anxious and anxious. But now, she didn't want Xing Xian to be like this. Kong Bebe didn't want him to be like this. Kong Bebe was happy that he didn't talk much. Even if in the eyes of others, he was a demon and an abnormal person, he still gave her all the tolerance and love. Kong Bebe said, "You can go out and have fun, but you have to change your outfit. It's too weird." Xing Xian touched his sideburns sneakily. "Don't I look good? I specially did it." Kong Bebe sighed. "Okay, but I have to take you to wash it off. You're not suitable for this." Xing Xian glanced at the woman and nodded. Okay. I'll listen to you." Kong Bebe felt a little numb in her heart, but she was happy. She was about to leave with Xing Xian and get on the dirty motorcycle. Mrs. Kong was furious. Her delicate daughter was about to get on that dirty motorcycle. She couldn't bear to look at it. Mrs. Kong immediately coughed and quickly walked over to Kong Bebe. "Where are you going?" Kong Bebe saw her mother and her face turned pale. Her mother had discovered Xing Xian without warning. Xing Xian was now a poor boy with no capital. Her mother definitely wouldn't like him. The counterattack of the cannon fodder supporting female lead. Chapter 3954. How much love and hate was concentrated in such a small village. The undercurrents were like the fluttering wings of a butterfly. It didn't feel much here. But on the other side of the world, it had a huge impact. The reincarnated girl and transmigrated had always been at odds with each other. Li Tsueyan had sunk into depression after losing her space. Even now, she still couldn't adapt to life without her space. Ning Shu was a little vexed. The space could suppress Zhang Qingqing's physique, but the space could absorb the world's light from providence through Zhang Qingqing. This was a benefit that came knocking on the door for the space. The space couldn't stay in Zhang Qingqing's body forever. He had to resolve Zhang Qingqing's koi life as soon as possible. She originally had an ordinary life providence. This life providence was a result of her physique, or perhaps something had been done to her soul before she was reborn. Ning Shu, who was doing such a mission for the first time, felt numb. With the space, Zhang Qingqing's life became more nourishing and she became more beautiful. However, the after effect of obtaining the space was that she no longer attracted small animals. In the past, she would be able to retrieve them after wandering around the mountains, but now, that was no longer the case. Zhang Qingqing didn't take it to heart in the beginning, but as time passed, she realized that her magical physique had disappeared. She immediately felt melancholic. She was used to such good luck. Suddenly, she lost her good luck and felt upset. She went from being a lucky person to an ordinary person. In this era, there was a lack of food and clothing. Through her magical physique, Zhang Qingqing was able to let her family eat meat. Now that there were no wild animals, life became more difficult. Without meat, the food didn't taste good. Although there was a spirit spring, it was water. It didn't have any taste. After a long time, it was inevitable that the taste in her mouth would be bland. The Zhang family's children looked at Zhang Qingqing eagerly. They had long formed an awareness in their hearts that if they followed their sister, she would have meat to eat. Now, there was no meat. A child suggested, "Sister, let's go to the mountains to find something to eat." They were going to pick up wild animals. Usually, they would go to the mountains for pheasants or hares. They would also catch more fish than others. Relying on these things could make their lives slightly better. In the Zhang family's hearts, Zhang Qingqing was a fairy with special abilities. Zhang Qingqing couldn't express the bitterness in her heart. She didn't tell her family that her abilities seemed to be gone. She couldn't attract small animals. If she encountered a dangerous wild animal like a wild boar, she might not be able to eat it. Wild boars eat people. Zhang Qingqing touched her chest. There was a snail inside. Every day, a few drops of spirit spring water would drip out from the snail. With this thing, her miraculous physique began to slowly disappear. Facing the expectant eyes of her children, Zhang Qingqing reluctantly nodded. Okay. Hopefully, he would be able to gain something from this trip. The children cheered as they carried their baskets and followed Zhang Qingqing into the mountains. Along the way, Zhang Qingqing's heart was beating very fast. Seeing that they were still going deeper, she couldn't help but advise, "Don't go in, it's too dangerous." She didn't know if she could protect these children now. If something happened to one of them, it would be heart-wrenching. But these children didn't seem to care and said, "Sister, if we don't go deeper, how can we find good things?" Following Zhang Qingqing, there had never been an accident. Every time they returned with a full load, it made these children a lot bolder. Everything that could be eaten outside had already been taken away, so they could only go inside. Zhang Qingqing furrowed her brows and followed along. She was still worried and kept telling herself not to go in. But they had already come here, and there were no surprises. The children were unwilling to give up and still wanted to go deeper. Zhang Qingqing's face was cold. "If you want to go in, you can go by yourselves. In any case, I'm not going. It's not like you don't know how dangerous it is inside." She clutched her chest. Through her clothes, she could feel the bulge. She was conflicted about whether to throw away this thing or not. Could it be that her physique clashed with this thing? But Zhang Qingqing was very reluctant to give up the few drops of spiritual water every day. This thing could allow her to have perfect and flawless skin. For women, this was too tempting. In order to be beautiful, girls could endure all kinds of torture. And this simple and crude effect was like an elixir. It was very difficult to give it up. Just this little bit of spiritual water was hard for Zhang Qingqing to give up, so Li Tsueyin, who had lost her space, was even more uncomfortable. Li Tsueyin had the spiritual spring and a hidden space that no one could discover. This thing was like a demon. Once touched, it couldn't be separated. Usually, it was an unknown little thing. It didn't make any requests and worked hard without complaint, giving the host the greatest convenience. It was like this that made the host unable to leave them. In the end, even if they knew that they were making a deal with a demon, so what? They were willing. There were rustling sounds in the grass. Some brave children directly pushed the grass aside and saw two small wild boars inside. They were making snorting sounds and were using their noses to dig the soil. Everyone was pleasantly surprised. The two small wild boars could be considered a harvest. The small wild boars were quite cute and didn't have fangs. The agile boy was like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey and grabbed the small wild boar. The small wild boar's strength wasn't very great. It could only scream at the top of its lungs when it was grabbed. Zhang Qingqing looked around nervously and said, "Let's go quickly. This is a piglet. There must be a female wild boar." She was frightened. "Don't let it scream. It will attract the wild boars." Through her clothes, she tightly grasped the snail in her chest. It was as if she was sitting on pins and needles. She couldn't sit still. Seeing that these children only knew how to be happy, she scanned and found a stone the size of a face. She lifted it up and smashed it directly on the piglet's head. The piglet struggled with its four limbs. It kicked hard twice and stopped moving. It wasn't clear if it was dead or fainted. Blood spurted out from its head and splashed onto Zhang Qingqing's body. Zhang Qingqing's decisive action made the other children stunned for a moment. They also picked up a stone and smashed it on the piglet's head, causing it to faint. Zhang Qingqing cut some grass and covered it in the basket. She stuffed some grass around it so that people couldn't see what was in the basket and would think that it was grass. She put the two piglets into the basket. The piglets weren't big to begin with. They probably ran out of the cave and met Zhang Qingqing and the others. After covering the wild boars with a thick layer of grass, Zhang Qingqing hurriedly urged, "Let's go quickly. The sow is coming back." The group of people ran very fast, but they still couldn't match the speed of the sow's four legs. The sow caught up with the group of people and sniffed with its nose. It was probably sniffing the smell of its own children. Smelling the smell of blood, the sow's behavior became irritable and furious. It directly rushed towards the children carrying the basket. Chapter 39:55. The sow was very big, and its whole body was covered with standing pig hair. It was as dark as needles, and its yellow fangs were as thick as a finger. The child who had been targeted was frightened. He was so scared that he didn't have the strength to lift his feet. In a split second, Zhang Qingqing threw away the necklace on her neck and rushed towards her brother. She tried to use her body to block the wild boar's attack. With her physique, she definitely wouldn't be hurt as much as her brother. The wild boar's eyes turned red. It raised its fangs and rushed towards the person who hurt its child. It wanted to use its fangs to pierce his stomach. Zhang Qingqing pushed her brother away. The sow hit Zhang Qingqing with a bang. Zhang Qingqing was immediately sent flying by this force. She hit a tree trunk and curled up in pain. The sow was also sent flying by this force. It was dizzy and tried to get up, but it fell to the ground again. Qingqing. Everyone was stunned and quickly ran towards Zhang Qingqing. Zhang Qingqing felt that her waist was about to break. She lay on the ground and panted violently. The person who was pushed away by Zhang Qingqing was about to cry. He quickly asked, "Qingqing, are you okay?" Zhang Qingqing gritted her teeth and said, "Wait for me to rest for a while. I'll be fine soon." When the pain was over, she could get up. The group of children realized that they were just children. When they encountered danger, there was nothing they could do. The wild boar had rough skin and thick flesh. It was rebounded by Zhang Qingqing's force. Although it was dizzy for a while, it quickly regained consciousness. It huffed and puffed as it rushed towards the person who hurt its child with hatred. Zhang Qingqing's voice became shrill. "Get out of the way. Throw away the basket. Don't take the piglets inside." The others got up from Zhang Qingqing, threw away their things, and ran desperately. Fear filled everyone's heart. No one dared to look back. The wild boar chased these people desperately, full of hatred. "I can't run anymore." A child's face was full of despair. He was tripped by a dead branch and couldn't get up for a while. Soon, he was hit by the wild boar behind him. The wild boar used its tusks to poke the child. If the tusks hit the child, there would be 2 bloody holes. If the tusks hit the child's vitals, he would definitely die. Zhang Qingqing was scared out of her wits. She watched helplessly as the wild boar hit the children. Her mind was filled with complicated thoughts. She regretted bringing these children here. He shouldn't have any hopes of getting lucky. What should he do? How should he save them? Pine. Just as the wild boar was about to hit the person, the wild boar hit a transparent barrier. The invisible barrier blocked the wild boar's path. The wild boar tried several times, but it couldn't get through. With the wild boar's limited intelligence, it couldn't understand what was going on or why it couldn't get through. Not only did the wild boar not understand what was going on, but the group of children also did not understand what was going on. Run! Zhang Qingqing shouted. She seemed to have injured her lungs before, so her voice was hoarse. Even if she used a little bit of strength, her body would be in great pain. Perhaps he had injured his internal organs. The child who fell to the ground realized that he was fine. The wild boar didn't hit him. When he heard Zhang Qingqing's voice, he quickly got up and ran with everyone. It wasn't easy to run out of the forest, but no one dared to stay. It was hard to guarantee that the wild boar would follow them out like a madman. They didn't know how long that invisible barrier could stop the wild boar. Seeing the Zhang family's children run out of the forest, some villagers jokingly asked, "You guys went in again. Did you kill another wild boar?" The group of children was now afraid of hearing the word wild boar. They supported Zhang Qingqing, whose face was purple, back home. When the other villagers saw this, they hurriedly asked what happened. A child cried and said, "Sister was hit by a wild boar." When the villagers heard this, they were so scared that they sucked in a breath of cold air. She was hit by a wild boar. Looking at Zhang Qingqing's face, it wouldn't be good. It was just a joke. They didn't expect to really encounter a wild boar. When Zhang Qingqing and the others returned to the production team, Ning Shu removed the mental barrier. The wild boar was really crazy. It hit her again and again, causing her head to hurt. The wild boar vented for a while, but found that it was useless. Its enemy had already run far away. It could only run back. It opened the basket on its back and used its mouth to nudge its child. The child didn't move. It was dead. The wild boar turned in place and could only leave. The dead piglet was bound to attract other hunters. Whether it was wolves or snakes, it was more difficult for the wild boar to deal with them. The whole production team gathered in the Zhang family. Ning Shu could avoid many people and enter the forest. He found the space that Zhang Qingqing had thrown away. The space changed owners again. Ning Shu flicked the space with his finger. "Why don't you give me 2 drops of spiritual liquid?" The space stayed motionless and pretended to be dead. It probably couldn't be kind to Ning Shu anymore, so it simply didn't use some small favors to bribe her. Again and again, it hit it with a stone. If it formed the way of heaven and formed the world, it would directly pull this guy into its own world. No matter how powerful you were, you would be limited in other people's world. It had the feeling that in its world, it was invincible, and it was the master of its territory. Ordinary people could trample an ant to death. When people drank the shrinking potion and became the size of an ant, they couldn't easily lift their feet to crush the ant. If it was in the void, Ning Shu could easily become the leaf of this world. But in this world, she couldn't do it. Ning Shu was too lazy to care about the space that pretended to be dead. She was in a good mood. Because when she discovered the crisis, the power that burst out of Zhang Qingqing's body had almost exhausted the power of her special constitution. Her power came from her soul. It must be something engraved in her soul when she was reincarnated. Zhang Qingqing, who was reborn, had this power. But as long as it was power, it would be exhausted. If she wanted to find out what was wrong with Zhang Qingqing's soul, she might have to go to the world of reincarnation to find out. This was something that Ning Shu had never encountered. She knew that the reincarnation pool could wash away the 7 emotions and 6 desires, memories and sins in the soul. As for whether it could wash away the things in the soul that didn't belong to the 7 emotions and 6 desires, Ning Shu didn't know. She once owned a world of reincarnation, but she didn't have the confidence to study it. Maybe it was because the world of reincarnation was managed by someone, so there was no mess. If there was anything abnormal, Zhu Jun and the others would definitely tell her at the first moment. Zhu Jun and the others? She didn't know how they were doing. The little devil should be looking after the world of reincarnation now. Forget it, she didn't want to think about it. She wouldn't see them for the time being. Maybe Zhang Qingqing was a powerful person in her previous life. When she jumped into the reincarnation pool, she gave herself some power. Chapter 3956. Ning Shu stayed in the cave for a while. Mountain and the rest would lower their heads from time to time and look at the cave entrance with their big eyes. To prevent Ning Shu from starving to death in the cave, they felt relieved when they sensed the aura inside. She said she was cultivating in seclusion, but they couldn't disturb her. They could only wait and see if she was going to die. To be honest, Mountain and the rest didn't think Ning Shu's seclusion was useful. Since she had found something to do, then let her do it. She didn't have to worry about her body. The more she worried, the sooner she died. She might not have time to think about her body's condition when she was so busy. Anyway, in the hearts of the God Stone clan, Ning Shu would die young and die. Fortunately, he had their protection. Without their protection, he would definitely return to the embrace of the void if he lived alone in the void. This was because they had never seen a cub weaker than her. The God Stone clan was very tolerant of a cub that could die at any time. To put it bluntly, why bother with a person who was about to die? Moreover, the God Stone clan wasn't narrow-minded. Although Mountain was worried that Ning Shu would die in the cave, he was happy that Ning Shu had something to do. This way, he could sleep. He wouldn't be woken up by the weight of Mount Tai. However, Mountain was happy too early. As time passed, the cub still didn't come out of the cave, causing him to be unable to sleep well. He suddenly woke up in the middle of his sleep and got up to look at the cub in the cave. He couldn't help but sigh. Why was the cub so troublesome? There was no end to his worries. Ning Shu, who was about to go moldy, finally came out of the cave. She was dirty all over, but her eyes were very bright. They were so bright that they were dazzling. Mountain quickly asked, "Are you hungry?" Ning Shu's first sentence was, "Have I lost weight?" She had been on a diet for so long. Didn't she feel thin at all? Mountain was speechless. What kind of unlucky child was this? Were all cubs like this? Shan Yu said perfunctorily, "You've become skinnier." How heartbreaking. Ning Shu was satisfied. He raised his hand and showed it to Mountain. Mountain was confused. "What happened to your claw?" Ning Shu. "No, don't you see anything different about this hand?" Shan Yu took a closer look and felt very uncomfortable. Now, he was asking him questions again and again. One moment, he was asking if he had become thinner. The next moment, he was asking if there was anything different about his claws. Who the hell knew what was different? It was getting harder and harder to take care of the cub. It was getting harder and harder to figure out her thoughts. She was still as cute as before, as long as she was given food. Eating was no longer enough to satisfy her. Ning Shu looked at Shan Yu with pity. He was blind at such a young age. Couldn't he see how swollen her meridians were? Ning Shu had spent a lot of time absorbing the energy inside. He could not wait to share it with Mountain. However, when he saw the blank look on Mountain's face, Ning Shu understood. There was something wrong with the way he spoke. He could have just said it directly. There was no need to beat around the bush with Mountain. Ning Shu pointed at the meridian from his thumb to his wrist. This is swollen. It's all the energy I've collected. He had probably absorbed too much energy, causing this meridian to feel a little swollen and painful. Mountain did not care at all. What kind of energy was in such a short meridian? However, he did not show it. Instead, he went against his conscience and praised Ning Shu. Ning Shu wanted to test this energy. If it was strong enough, it could be his trump card. Ning Shu looked around. Then, he pointed at a rock and shot the energy from his meridian through his finger. This energy was like a weak ray. It shot towards the rock at an extremely fast speed and penetrated it in an instant. However, after penetrating the rock, this energy dissipated. It was just this energy that consumed half of his stored energy. His meridian was no longer swollen and painful. However, there was a side effect. His finger was painful and swollen. This was the consequence of having no meridian or dantian. He had to rely on his body to resist. When Mountain saw that such a thick rock was pierced through, he burped. He looked very surprised. After all, he had always treated Ning Shu's actions as child's play. He walked over to observe the hole. The hole was not very big, but it was very lethal. However, it was not a big deal to pierce through this rock. This rock was not very hard. In order to test the attack power of this attack, Mountain patted his body. Then, he said to Ning Shu, "Come, hit me." Ning Shu was stunned. This is not good. What if I hurt you? Ning Shu did not know much about this energy because he did not know if it would cause any damage to Mountain. Perhaps the attack power was not enough to cause any damage. If the attack power was off the charts and caused damage to Mountain's body, it would directly penetrate Mountain's body. It would be like piercing through a rock. Mountain said directly, "My body is definitely the best tool to test my strength. I have fused with the stick stone. My body's defense is needless to say." In the entire race, his defense was probably the highest. It was mainly because he used 2 stick stones that his defense had a qualitative breakthrough. "Come, attack me," Mountain said. Ning Shu nodded. Okay. He would try not to attack the vital parts. Ning Shu raised his hand. He did not know which part of Mountain to attack. He definitely could not attack his head, stomach, or limbs. He felt that his entire body was a vital part. Mountain stood and waited for Ning Shu to attack. However, when he saw how conflicted she was, he patted his shoulder. Attack the shoulder. Okay. Ning Shu aimed at the shoulder and used the last bit of energy in her meridians. The light beam hit Shan Yu's shoulder near his arm. After a crisp, ding sound, Shan Yu stood there steadily without any reaction. However, in the next second, his whole body flew out and fell to the ground with a thud. It was clearly the effect of this energy. Ning Shu's fingers hurt even more. However, she ran to Mountain and asked, "Are you okay?" The other people looked over and asked what had happened. They were sleeping soundly and were suddenly woken up. Mountain, who was as tall as Mountain, fell to the ground with a bang. It was like an earthquake. Mountain coughed and struggled to sit up. He moved his shoulder and hissed in pain. Chapter 3957. Blood flowed out of the hole on Shan Yu's shoulder. It was only a small amount of blood, and it wasn't a serious injury. Shan Yu and the others' bodies were covered with stones and metals, which provided them with a strong defense. However, they would still be injured if this defense was broken. Ning Shu's attack had broken through the surface defense and injured their flesh. However, Shan Yu's defense was very strong, and the attack couldn't penetrate his defense immediately. As a result, Shan Yu was sent flying for a long distance. Ning Shu was also a little shocked. The energy she absorbed from the void was not spiritual energy, nor was it the energy of an ordinary small world. Clearly, the energy in the void was more astonishing than the energy of an ordinary small world. Ning Shu saw a glimmer of hope. A broad road was laid out in front of him. If his body was repaired, his meridians were reforged, and he could practice peerless martial arts, his strength would advance by leaps and bounds. Shan Yu was also shocked. He seemed to have the stick stone, but this energy still penetrated a little. An ordinary master would definitely have been penetrated directly. Shan Yu clearly realized that Ning Shu's power couldn't be underestimated. He said to the worried Ning Shu, "It's okay. It's just a little painful. It's good that you have such power." This wasn't a small matter. The Divine Stone Tribe was known to have the best defense in the void, but they were a little weak in the face of this kind of attack. However, it was very difficult for this kind of power to kill them. After all, it could only attack one place. Ning Shu's thumb was already very red and swollen. It was very red and painful. If this attack came twice, her finger would definitely be crippled. The energy in her meridians was empty. She had spent so much time in the cave to gather it, but it was all used up in just a few minutes. Other than a little flesh injury, Shan Yu's body was also numb from the shock. He couldn't recover, but it wasn't a big problem. Shan Yu encouraged Ning Shu, "You have to work hard. I think this power is good, although it can only attack once." Ning Shu retorted, "Not once, twice." Shan Yu, "That what was the difference between once and twice?" Ning Shu was speechless. Of course, there was a difference. Sometimes, the battle situation could change in an instant. With one more attack, the one who fell might not be him. This could be his trump card, his trump card. Ning Shu patted his little heart. He felt so at ease, as if his feet were firmly planted on the ground. Even if his body was weak, he still had the means to attack. He was not afraid of being taken down by an unarmed dog. Ning Shu looked at Shan Yu's wound. "Do you want me to find some medicine?" "No need, I'll be fine in a while," Shan Yu said nonchalantly. He was almost crying in his heart. It was because he was not prepared and was knocked down by this force. It was too embarrassing. It was so embarrassing that Shan Yu wanted to cover his face. He changed the topic abruptly, "Do your fingers hurt?" Ning Shu didn't have Shan Yu's dignity as a great clan leader, so he cried and said, "It hurts, my fingers are going to break." Shan Yu immediately said, "Your strength is too boring. It's purely hurting yourself. You still have to hurt yourself to launch an attack. It's not enough." Ning Shu held his hand and nodded. "Yes, it's just like that. It's not enough." He had no dantian, no meridians, and had to rely on brute force. To be honest, every time he launched an attack, Ning Shu felt that the bones in his thumb were going to break. It was so painful. Now, his skin was so red and swollen that it would break with a touch. It was painful. Ning Shu washed the dust off his body and ate some fruits to fill his stomach. He said to Shan Yu, who was staring at his wound, "I'm going to cultivate in seclusion." Shan Yu nodded. Ning Shu asked worriedly, "Are you really okay? Do you need to find Carp and the others to heal you?" "No need, you don't need to find them for such a small injury. They will give you more for each visit." Shan Yu asked Ning Shu to go cultivate and not worry about them. Ning Shu stared at him and asked again, "Really? Is there really no problem?" Shan Yu raised his hand and swore, "There's really no problem. Go cultivate in seclusion. I'll put some fruits at the entrance." Ning Shu went in and continued to cultivate. Only when there was energy in his meridians did he feel uneasy. When Ning Shu turned and went in, Shan Yu suddenly stood up. The ground shook 3 times, and he gathered with the other clansmen. "Her attack is a bit strong. If it was you, it would definitely pierce through your entire body. We might lose our title of the strongest defense in the void. Shan Yu said to the clansmen. The God Stone clan was proud of their own defense. Even if the attack hit their body, it would not touch their flesh. Instead, it would hit the stone or metal outside. The clansmen also gathered together and whispered to each other. A clansman said, "This is good. What we lack is strong attack power. She has attack power, and we have defense power. In this aspect, she makes up for what we lack." Another clansman said, "It's just that her body is too weak. She can't attack for a long time, and whether or not she could survive was a big problem." Shan Yu did not care too much. It's good that she has attack power. But you have to be careful. She's small. She might use this attack power to attack you. The other clansman laughed and said that she was too inexperienced. Even if she was injured, she did not have the ability to attack again. On the other hand, they could kill her with a finger. Ning Shu's attack had brought some fear to the God Stone clan. After all, it was not a small matter to be able to pierce through their defense. But now that they thought about it, they knew that her attack power was not a threat at all. It might be a threat to the lives of other clansmen, but it was only 1 or 2 attacks. In the end, it was still very weak. After Ning Shu entered the cave, he began to cultivate. He did not know what was going on outside, nor did he know what the God Stone clan was thinking. Even if he knew, he would not say anything. He would just laugh it off. She had never thought of attacking the God Stone clan. The God Stone clan did not do anything to her. Moreover, they were very kind to her. They treated her as their own clan. She would not attack anyone but the God Stone clan. Moreover, with the God Stone clan's character, Ning Shu felt that he would not have any conflict with them. First, the resources they obtained were not in conflict. The God Stone clan needed hard stones and metals. Ning Shu did not need these. She would not walk the same path as the God Stone clan. Second, Ning Shu had always been under the protection of the God Stone clan. Chapter 3958. Ning Shu took out the space. It was suppressed too much in the world of living beings. Now that he was in the world of reincarnation, he didn't feel such suppression. He used the strength Vajra finger to crush this space. He had to make some preparations before crushing it. After crushing it, spiritual energy would seep out. This spiritual energy clashed with that of the world of reincarnation. He had to collect it and return it to the world of living beings. Ning Shu pinched the snow-white snail. The space seemed to have sensed danger and kept on shaking. However, it was unable to break away from Ning Shu's fingers. The space became extremely hot and tried to use the high temperature to break free from Ning Shu's control. But Ning Shu's skin was thick and he was able to withstand such a temperature. The space trembled pitifully, as if it was begging for mercy. It even showed signs of wanting to fuse with Ning Shu. Ning Shu didn't care about the space. He pinched it with 2 fingers and like a glass bottle falling to the ground, there was a crisp sound. The space shattered and the spiritual energy within spread out. Ning Shu collected the spiritual energy and said to Go Z, let's go out. Then, Ning Shu didn't know how to get out. When he entered, he could help himself but he didn't know how to get out. Did he have to jump into the reincarnation pool? That wouldn't do. Go Z raised his head and stuck out his tongue. His black eyes stared at Ning Shu. Since there was no way out, then he would just barge in. Ning Shu reached out and tore open a space crack like he was opening a door. He walked out from the crack. Go Z took 2 steps back and burped. Ning Shu stepped out of the world of reincarnation. He turned his head and said to Go Z, let's go. When the time comes, I will help you and send you back to the world of reincarnation. Go Z followed Ning Shu. After the two of them left, the crack closed once more. As a Go-Z who was used to the gray world, he wasn't used to such a colorful world. He felt like his eyes were about to be blinded. Especially when the sun shone on his body, that comfortable warmth was indescribable. Things like the sun would never appear in the world of reincarnation. Ning Shu released all the spiritual energy he had collected and returned it to this world. As soon as he returned to this world, Ning Shu immediately felt as if 10 mountains were pressing down on him. Previously, she was able to use her strength in the world of reincarnation, but now, she couldn't use it. Just carrying these mountains consumed all of her strength. Motherfucker, isn't this too ruthless? What good is it for you to suppress it so ruthlessly? If I were to die in this world, what good would it do for you? Ning Shu felt that even if she had to do missions in the future, she could not allow the heavenly Tao to suppress her power as it pleased. What if he died in the world? That would be a shame. If he had the strength but couldn't use it, he would die a tragic and funny death. Go-Z stretched out his paw and played with the bristlegrass by the side of the road. He was very careful. When the bristlegrass moved, Go-Z was so frightened that he jumped back. Why are you here? Ning Shu's nominal mother saw Ning Shu squatting by the ridge with a dog, and her face was a little blank. Where did you find this dog? Is it burnt? Mother asked. Ning Shu looked at the blank mother and felt a little sympathy. As long as they saw her, many people would have a blank look on their faces. The main thing was that there was no such person in their memory, but they were suddenly stuffed with a strange memory, and they could not merge it together at all. Ning Shu said, I'll go home immediately. She ran and then called Go-Z, let's go back. Go-Z ran behind Ning Shu. It looked really dark. It was a black dog-shaped thing, and even its facial features could not be seen clearly. Ning Shu brought Go-Z to the Zhang family. Zhang Qingqing was still lying on the bed. Although her face was still not good, she was still angry. The Zhang family could not leave Zhang Qingqing alone. The onlookers all said that Zhang Qingqing was hanging on for life. If she was not angry, she would be gone. The Zhang family felt terrible and they were also preparing for the funeral. The atmosphere was very solemn and sad. Ning Shu said to Go-Z, the person on the bed was blessed by you. She suffered a fatal injury and is still alive. You didn't give her a peaceful life, but a few lives. Go-Z stuck out his tongue and stood up to look at Zhang Qingqing. He sensed that there was indeed blessing power in Zhang Qingqing's body. He barked, why don't I take back the power? From the moment it entered this world, it felt a pair of eyes that were mercilessly focused on it. Ning Shu rolled his eyes, you've already given it. Why do you want to take it back? Next time when you pray, don't give so much. Zhang Qingqing's situation was really too exaggerated. Go-Z nodded and followed Ning Shu home. Ning Shu said, I'll send you off. Go-Z said, no need. I can send myself off. I can go back by myself. Ning Shu said. Then you can go back. Go-Z squatted down and said, I want to see if I really gave too much power. He stared at Ning Shu with his black eyes and asked, you're not from this world, right? Ning Shu nodded, of course not. I came here because of some things. Go-Z was sunbathing in the courtyard. He turned over and revealed his black belly. He was very comfortable. Zhang Qingqing, who had been lying in bed for half a month, pulled through. She could slowly eat some liquid food and gradually got better. Occasionally, she could even get out of bed and walk a few steps. Everyone was surprised. She was clearly going to die, but she was still alive. She was really lucky. Everyone thought that Zhang Qingqing was a lucky person. She was injured like that, but other than the doctor from the health center who came to take a look, she recovered without spending much money. Zhang Qingqing's parents were so happy that they cried. They had already prepared for the worst, but they were so surprised that their daughter could recover. The joy of regaining something that was lost was indescribable. During this time, Feng Min came to take a look. When she saw that Zhang Qingqing had really recovered, she was very confused. She had seen the situation at that time. The chances of Zhang Qingqing surviving were very small. She vomited blood with blood clots. Her injuries were very serious. But now, she was fine. This made Feng Min suspect that this Zhang Qingqing was not the Zhang Qingqing she knew. She was like her, with a different core in her body. But she was so seriously injured. Even if there were other souls in this body would not be able to support life activities. She would still die. Also, Zhang Qingqing was not dead. She didn't suddenly come back to life. She transmigrated into Feng Min's body because Feng Min's soul had already left the body. Zhang Qingqing, who was not dead, should not be taken over by other souls. Chapter 39-59. Then, this idiot became popular among the students, and all kinds of jokes were created. Zhang Qingqing was speechless. She asked her mother, "Do you know what happened on the internet?" "What happened?" Ning Shu asked nonchalantly. "Is that thing you created real?" Zhang Qingqing asked. Ning Shu nodded. "Of course it's real. In less than half a month, your appetite will double." Zhang Qingqing was speechless. Who wants to become a rice bucket? No, the main point is not why my mother has such a thing. If it's to create hype, it's really idiotic and shameful. No one would believe it. Ning Shu said to his daughter, "You can practice it. It's not like you can achieve anything, but it'll strengthen your body." Zhang Qingqing was speechless. "I don't want to practice this idiotic thing at all." Ning Shu pursed his lips. "If you don't want to practice, then forget it. I've been practicing." Zhang Qingqing, you're really idiotic. You're worthy of being my mother. This was because the number of clicks for this video had reached 5,000. Considering that Ning Shu was a small and invisible person who was suffocating in the deep sea, 5,000 clicks was already considered pretty good. The netizens had all kinds of imagination and created all kinds of jokes. Anyway, Ning Shu was seriously spreading the word about the ultimate martial arts, but the netizens were not serious at all. Suddenly, the number of followers increased. So Ning Shu started to post again. Ultimate Martial Arts JPG. JPG, share this ultimate martial arts and you'll have good luck and a healthy body. Zhang Qingqing was speechless. Zhang Xian was speechless. Zhang Xian heard that his aunt had started her own account, so he secretly followed her. But when he opened it, he saw this strange scene. Ning Shu thought that this account was pretty good. It was probably in accordance with the will of the heavens to promote the ultimate martial arts. It must be the will of the heavens. After all, these small worlds were born from the ultimate martial arts. Promoting the ultimate martial arts was also beneficial to the small worlds. After Ning Shu posted, all kinds of jokes came out. Ning Shu changed his account to Feng Shui Master. There would never be a lack of idiots in this world. Some idiots actually followed Ning Shu's instructions and started to cultivate this thing. Moreover, they didn't even do it live. It even attracted a lot of traffic. Everyone had a herd mentality, and such a strange method could also attract traffic and attention. With traffic, they would have everything. They would have the world. It didn't matter what method he used to gain traffic. This account was managed quite well, and it could be considered a small advantage. Very soon, someone came to buy Ning Shu's account. An account with traffic was money. Ning Shu didn't sell it, and she still wanted to have her fortune told. Every day, there would be people begging for the follow-up of the peerless martial art. Ning Shu would only update 4 slots every time he updated, and the content he updated was very little. He wouldn't be able to get everything out at once. he still had to maintain the account. Sometimes, there would be an advertisement link below. This link was paid by the merchant to advertise. The money was calculated according to the clicks. As for whether people bought things or not, it was none of their business. Zheng Xian and Xing Tingting were really speechless. They never thought that she would use such an idiotic method to maintain the account. Every time, Zheng Xian would click on the link. After all, every time he clicked on it, she might be able to earn more money. If she earned money, she wouldn't have to stare at his parents' compensation money. With money in hand, he wouldn't feel bad. With money, Zheng Xian felt that his temper had improved a lot. Even his EQ and IQ were online. He wasn't angry anymore. However, the most difficult thing in the world was not knowing how to earn money. The only way to solve his worries was to get rich quickly. In the beginning, Ning Shu's income wasn't high. However, compared to the hard work in the factory, it was very easy at home. There was no one watching him all the time. He slept until he woke up naturally. It was simply wonderful. Traffic also brought traffic money. Ning Shu now had the energy and time to build the spirit. In the factory, he worked non-stop every day. He was half-dead tired. When he went home, he just wanted to sleep. There was nothing else to say. Now, he could even sit on a face mask and enjoy life. Just like in the past, when Ning Shu was busy running for his life, he didn't care whether he looked good or not. It was good enough that he was alive. However, as he slowly became stronger, he started to pay attention to his appearance. After all, he had to socialize and face more people. The deep sea was too dark. The creatures in the sea were all blind. Anyway, no one could see them. With a material foundation, he could build the spirit. Xing Tingting felt that her mother was getting younger and younger. In short, the house was clean and there were no strange smells. When she returned home, she was in a very good mood. She didn't feel that the house was cramped and uncomfortable at all. The kind of joy that radiated from the spirit was really very comfortable. Xing Jiqiang also accepted Ning Shu's computer and mobile phone. He was an honest person and didn't come into contact with these things. It was a relatively new thing, so it was a little difficult to accept. After looking at it once, he waved his hand. He couldn't understand the world of young people. Life was easy, and time passed quickly. Anyway, Ning Shu felt that the past few days were like years. In the blink of an eye, Zheng Xian was already in his second year of high school. He got good results in his first year of high school. There were 63 students in the class, and he got 35th place. At least he wasn't the last. When the second year of high school started, there would be a parent-teacher meeting. Ning Shu asked Zheng Xian, "Is it still the same form teacher?" "No, it has been divided into different subjects. She probably went to teach liberal arts," Zheng Xian said. Ning Shu shook his head. "Don't set up a flay. Usually, you will be slapped in the face." In the end, when they saw Teacher Zhao during the registration, Zheng Xian and Teacher Zhao's expressions became a little indescribable. She didn't want to teach Zheng Xian anymore. Although Zheng Xian was now studying hard and improving himself, she still felt annoyed when she saw him. There was no other way. Especially when she saw Ning Shu, her expression became even worse. Ning Shu acted as if nothing had happened. He smiled very brightly at Teacher Zhao. "Teacher Zhao, it's really fate. It's still you teaching our child. Please take good care of him. He has already been educated by me. He definitely won't be like before. Don't worry." "Teacher Zhao, haha, do you remember what happened in the past?" Teacher Zhao wanted to stretch her face out in front of her. "Do you still remember?" "Heh, can I still choose my students?" Teacher Zhao said coldly. Ning Shu's expression turned cold. Without any warning, Teacher Zhao was shocked. She stopped talking to Ning Shu and talked to the other parents. She was afraid that she would suddenly go crazy. No matter how angry Teacher Zhao was, she couldn't deny that there was a shadow in her heart. Ning Shu didn't expect Teacher Zhao to take care of Zheng Xian, but she shouldn't always hold on to Zheng Xian. She should just ignore him. It was impossible to be fair. It wouldn't be fair in this lifetime. After all, people's hearts were crooked. Zheng Xian wasn't likable. After settling Zheng Xian's matter, Ning Shu started to enjoy life. Now, Ning Shu basically didn't need to go to school once a semester. Chapter 3960. Zheng Xian's grades were getting better and he was gradually catching up with the current classes. As Zheng Xian's tutor, it was time for Ji Hong to retire. Although Ji Hong felt it was a pity, she had completed her task. It was her first time being a tutor. Fortunately, her employer was good and she was able to earn her own living expenses. Next, it was time to earn tuition fees. The tuition fees were a big problem. She scrimped and saved as a tutor, but she still couldn't earn enough tuition fees. She still had to work part-time. Zheng Xian said, "I'll look for you if I need anything in the future." Ji Hong said with a smile, "Okay, boss, you can look for me if you need anything. I'm always waiting." This conversation was a little weird. She felt like something was wrong, but it wasn't a big deal. She didn't care about these details. Ning Shu's business was just so-so. It was enough to support the family. The only thing that made Ning Shu uncomfortable was that no matter what she said, these idiotic netizens would create a lot of idiotic jokes. She was really promoting the peerless martial arts. It was a very serious matter to get some power of faith for the peerless martial arts. Why weren't they serious? However, the Zheng family's life was more comfortable. Although the house was a little small, it didn't look poor or cramped at all. Even Zheng Xian would come over when he was free. After dinner, he would talk to Zheng Jiqiang. He probably wanted to talk to Ning Shu, but Ning Shu didn't care about him at all. Whenever Zheng Xian stuttered, Ning Shu's face would be filled with murderous intent. During this time, Zheng Xian received a call from an unknown number. It sounded like a girl's voice. It sounded like Kong Beibei's voice. Zheng Xian immediately hung up and blocked the number. He didn't know why she called him. What was wrong with her? When Zheng Xian did well, he would show his results to Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked at it carefully and said calmly, "Not bad." "Zheng Xian, then?" Ning Shu asked, "Is there anything else?" "Zheng Xian." "Nothing." Ning Shu nodded. "At least I didn't waste the tuition fees." According to Zheng Xian's results, he could be admitted to a university. Ning Shu encouraged her. "Keep it up." Time passed quickly. Zheng Xian's college entrance examination was about to begin. Zheng Xian was already an adult. He was 18 years old and did not need a guardian. Zheng Jiqiang did not seem to be aware of this. He was very worried about Zheng Xian filling in his university application. He went around asking for information about which major was better and how it would be easier to find a job after graduation. She couldn't sleep well the entire night, tossing and turning. Ning Shu's faint voice sounded in the darkness, "If you don't want to sleep, then get lost." Zheng Jiqiang was obviously used to Ning Shu's harshness. He went straight out of the room and sat in the living room smoking. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. What was there to worry about? Zheng Xian was someone who knew what was going on. He would make the decision himself. Sure enough, when filling in his university application, Zheng Xian did not inform the rest of the Zheng family. He filled in biological manufacturing. It had something to do with chemistry. Zheng Jiqiang was upset when he found out about this. "What major is this? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you fill in a teacher's degree? It would be great to be a teacher in the future." Being a teacher was a stable career. Zheng Xian, being a teacher, he might beat the students to death. Therefore, being a teacher was not a stable career. What's the purpose of this major? There were thousands of jobs in the world. As someone who worked in a closed factory, he would not be exposed to all aspects of society. Therefore, this major was very unfamiliar to him. It was obviously an unpopular major. He had never heard of it before. Would he be able to find a job after he graduated? After going around in circles, Zheng Xian still had to go down this path. He did not know if the same fate would befall him. Would he still go down the same path? Ning Shu felt that the heavens had to put all the pressure on a mentally unstable person. The result was naturally unexpected. Normal people would think of ways to remedy the situation. However, Zheng Xian wanted to die together with his enemy. He did not care about his reputation. Such a fearless person was actually very scary. He might not be able to control him. The human heart was changeable and complicated. For things like viruses, even if they were not spread through drugs, there would be other ways to spread them. Zheng Xian had the ability to develop special drugs. Zheng Xian said, she can find a good job. Zheng Jiqiang was still very dissatisfied. However, Ning Shu said directly, what does it have to do with you? She is now an adult. She can make any decision by herself. She is not your daughter. You have no right to interfere. Ning Shu's words were unpleasant and inhumane. It was very difficult to accept. Anyway, no one liked the truth. Zheng Jiqiang could not help but say, we are her elders. How can we harm her? Ning Shu said, we won't harm her, but she doesn't want to hear it. If she was your son, you could still use force. She was not your son. Even if she was your son, using force was very annoying. Zheng Jiqiang did not expect Zheng Xian to listen to him. However, his suggestion was to listen to him a little. Anyway, Zheng Jiqiang was very uncomfortable. He was very uncomfortable in his heart. However, no one cared about his feelings. Some people like to be touched by their own feelings. Moreover, when their contributions were not rewarded, they would be very resentful. Now, Zheng Jiqiang was very resentful. Ning Shu didn't want to face this tanned, old, and not handsome face at all. She was in a bad mood. However, after Zheng Jiqiang was depressed for a period of time, he knew that what was done could not be undone. There was no chance to change it. However, he always said that he felt that his efforts had been wasted. Ning Shu snorted. However, there was a change this time. The virus broke out in advance. It was spread through poultry. Ning Shu's first reaction was, bird flu. When Zheng Xian was in his second year of university, this virus broke out. At first, it was symptoms of a cold. Cold medicine could not be cured. The hospital was overcrowded. Only then did it officially attract attention. The Ministry of Health immediately released a news article to remind people not to use poultry. A new virus was spreading. Every household was to disinfect and not eat meat products that had not been tested. For a time, everyone was in a panic. People who went out all wore masks. If they could go out, they would definitely stay at home. Some schools were even closed. The hospital was overcrowded, and some of the medical staff were infected. Ning Shu disinfected his house and stored a lot of food and vegetables. After thinking about it, he spent money to buy a big freezer. He bought some fruits and vegetables and kept the freezer full. This virus had been raging for a long time. However, compared to the diseases that humans had not been able to solve, at least there was a special medicine for this virus. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.